They tested the DNA of a 100-year-old mummy, and it changes everything. Do you believe that just a few feet beneath your feet, an entire forgotten world could be waiting to be uncovered? There are things that have lain buried underground for thousands of years, yet when they finally come to light, they leave modern humans unable to fully explain them. Even more strangely, the deeper archaeologists dig, the more they uncover details that don't seem to follow any logical understanding found in history books. And sometimes, what is discovered forces scientists to ask an unsettling question. Have we been misunderstanding the past all along? The stories you're about to hear are not just about archaeology, they are real mysteries that once existed. Welcome to the Ancient History Channel, where we follow the traces of time to uncover stories buried for thousands of years. Here, every archaeological discovery is not just an old artifact, but a surviving fragment of human memory. Some mummies are so well preserved that they appear as if they are simply asleep, while certain ancient sites bear strange marks that have sparked years of scientific debate. What makes it even more fascinating is that the deeper we dig into the earth, the closer we come to truths that were never recorded before. From ancient structures built with astonishing precision to unusual rituals that reflect the fears and beliefs of early civilizations, all of these stories are waiting to be told. Each story is a mystery, and when you piece them together, you begin to realize that history is not just what has already happened, but also what is still being discovered. So if there were a hidden secret buried right beneath your feet at this very moment, would you want to be the one to find it? If your answer is yes, then let's begin the journey right now. 100-year-old mummy found intact in Vietnam. You know, the world of archaeology has always been mysterious and fascinating. There are things that, once buried, people assume time will erase completely. But there are also things that, the deeper they are buried, the more astonishing they become when finally uncovered. And a story that took place right in the bustling heart of Ho Chi Minh City, Vietnam, is a perfect example of that. The story began in January 1994, when a cemetery renovation project was carried out in the Khai neighborhood of District 5, Ho Chi Minh City. At first, everything proceeded normally, until workers came across a tomb unlike anything they had seen before. Instead of small, scattered graves, they found a burial complex covering hundreds of square meters, solidly built and so grand that it made everyone pause in astonishment. According to records from the Ho Chi Minh City Museum of Vietnamese History, the structure of this tomb was extremely unusual. The outer wall was rectangular, about 33 feet long, 20 feet wide, and over 3 feet high, with walls nearly 3 feet thick, sturdy like a miniature fortress. The three-entrance gate was intricately designed with lotus bud motifs, curved roofing, and dragon decorations. Everything about it conveyed a sense of solemnity and nobility, as if this was not a resting place for an ordinary person. But the real shock began when archaeologists started the excavation. After leveling the burial mound, they discovered 2 graves inside, one male and one female. However, the center of attention quickly focused on a large bundle, carefully wrapped in layers of silk and brocade, tightly secured with 9 fabric ties, each tied into a knot. The number 9 holding special meaning in Eastern culture, and when the layers were slowly unwrapped, everyone present was left almost speechless. Inside was the mummy of a woman, nearly perfectly preserved after more than 100 years. Her hair remained jet black, showing no signs of fading with time. Her muscles and skin, though slightly deteriorated, were still soft rather than stiff like typical mummies. Even her eyeballs and nasal cartilage were still intact, something extremely rare, even among the most famous mummies in the world. And that wasn't all. Her clothing and burial items also stunned researchers. She wore a loose robe fastened diagonally, with each button made of agate and gold-plated metal. On her feet were embroidered silk shoes with metallic thread, footwear typically reserved for royalty and nobility. On her wrists were 2 gold bracelets, and around her neck was a strand of Bodhi beads. Even more remarkably, beside the mummy was a small brocade pouch containing 3 sheets of paper written in Chinese characters. The contents included a Pure Land rebirth mantra, the names of 5 Buddhas, and a document related to religious initiation. These details not only hold spiritual significance, but also offer a glimpse into the inner life and beliefs of the deceased. After years of research and comparison with historical records, scientists finally identified her as Nguyen Thi Hue, a member of the royal family during the reign of Emperor Gia Long of Vietnam. Based on her small frame and slender hands, researchers concluded that she had lived a life of luxury, free from hard labor, fully consistent with her noble status. But what makes this story even more astonishing is the embalming technique. According to ancient records, preserving her body was not merely part of burial rituals, but also intended to extend the funeral period, a privilege reserved only for high-ranking nobility. However, the method used by people at that time was so sophisticated that it far exceeds what we might imagine. Without modern technology or complex chemicals, how were they able to preserve a body in such near-perfect condition for over a century? What's even more remarkable is that when the mummy was excavated, her joints could still be flexed, her body only slightly shrunken and not fully decomposed. This is not just a rare case, it is clear evidence of the advanced skills of ancient Vietnamese people in the art of preservation. It also shows that Vietnam, though a small country, was in no way inferior to any powerful nation in the world. 73 pre-Inca mummies with false heads in Peru. In the arid lands near Lima, Peru, where ancient ruins have lain silently beneath layers of dust and sand for thousands of years, archaeologists began what seemed like a routine excavation. At first, all they found were soil, rocks, and faint traces of the past. But the deeper they dug, the more they sensed something unusual, as if this place was holding on to a secret it did not want to reveal. Then the moment came. They uncovered an ancient cemetery, not just a few scattered graves, but an entire burial complex containing at least 73 bodies, dating back around 1,000 years, long before the Inca Empire rose to power and dominated this region. The site was identified as Pachacamac, an important religious center in ancient South American history. But what truly stunned everyone present was not the number 73, it was the way these bodies had been buried. Each mummy was tightly wrapped in multiple layers of fabric, some of them brightly colored and bound securely with rope. From the outside, they resembled human cocoons, carefully preserved through time. Every layer of cloth seemed to tell the story of a ritual, deliberate, structured, and certainly not random. But as archaeologists examined them more closely, a strange detail began to emerge. Some of the bodies, both male and female, no longer retained their original faces. Instead, they were buried with intricately carved masks made of wood and ceramic. These masks, known as false heads, transformed the discovery from a routine excavation into a mystery that has puzzled scientists ever since. Think about it. Why would ancient people do this? Why not allow the dead to depart with their own faces, but instead replace them with something entirely different? Was this a way to protect the soul? Or a ritual meant to help them be reborn under a new identity that we still don't fully understand? According to archaeologists, including Krzysztof Makowski, who led the research at the site, these false heads may carry deep symbolic meaning. They were not merely decorative objects, they could represent social status, roles in society, or even the form the deceased would take in the afterlife. And that's not all. In many of the tombs, researchers also found colorful ceramic artifacts crafted with remarkable precision and intricate patterns. These objects reflect a culture highly developed in both art and craftsmanship. The entire burial complex has been identified as belonging to the Wari culture, a civilization that flourished in the region from around 800 to 1100 AD. The Wari were known for their advanced mummification techniques, complex textile weaving, and refined ceramic production. However, they were also associated with mysterious religious practices, including human sacrifice and the use of hallucinogenic substances. Another detail makes the story even more complex. Near the cemetery, archaeologists discovered 2 wooden staffs carved with human figures. What's particularly remarkable is that they were found alongside shells of the Spondylus princeps, a type of marine mollusk native to what is now Ecuador, far to the north of Wari territory. What does this mean? Clearly, the Wari were not isolated. They maintained extensive trade networks and cultural connections with distant regions. In fact, the carvings on the staffs also show stylistic similarities to those of the Tiwanaku civilization, which existed to the south across areas of present-day Peru, Bolivia, and Chile. In other words, Pachacamac was not just a burial ground. It was a cultural crossroads, a place where ancient civilizations met, exchanged ideas, and influenced one another. According to researchers, the name Pachacamac in the native language means the one who gives life to the earth. Initially, it was a modest settlement during the Wari period. But over time, especially by the 15th century, when the Inca Empire rose to power, it became one of the most important religious centers in the region. And now, when we look back at these 73 mummies with faces that were not their own, we see more than just a strange burial ritual. We see an entire belief system, a completely different way of understanding life and death compared to our modern perspective. Fascinating, isn't it? 2,500-year-old baboon mummy that took scientists 118 years to explain. Amid the scorching sands of Egypt, where most people think of pharaohs and pyramids, there exists a strange story that has puzzled scientists for more than a century. It's not about royal mummies or buried treasure, but about the mummified remains of an animal that doesn't even belong to this land, the baboon. The story begins at a site with a rather unusual name, the Valley of the Monkeys. When archaeologists began excavating there, they discovered a series of baboon mummies buried in a highly organized manner, remarkably similar to how ancient Egyptians preserved human bodies. Through research, these mummies were dated to around 800 to 540 BC, more than 2,500 years ago. But what truly confused scientists was a small yet crucial detail. All of the baboons were missing their canine teeth. Think about it. If these were wild animals, why would they all share such an unusual trait? This strongly suggests human intervention. In fact, it's very likely that these baboons were raised in controlled conditions before their deaths. What makes this even more intriguing is that baboons are not native to Egypt. Today, they are primarily found in the Horn of Africa and the southwestern Arabian Peninsula, regions located far from Egypt. More than 2,500 years ago, when transportation technology was extremely limited, moving such animals over long distances would have been no simple task. So how did they end up here? This question has haunted scientists for 118 years since the first mummies were discovered. Only recently, thanks to modern genetic analysis, has a team of researchers from the University of Konstanz begun to uncover answers. Their findings suggest that these baboons did not originate in Egypt, but were likely brought from an ancient port known as Adulis. In antiquity, Adulis was a thriving trade hub, famous for dealing in luxury goods, including exotic animals. This helps explain how the baboons may have been transported to Egypt through established trade routes. However, Adulis may have only been a transit point rather than the original source. This leaves a major question unanswered. Where did these animals truly come from? Some scholars have proposed a connection to a legendary land known as Punt, a place from which ancient Egyptians imported goods for centuries, up until the first millennium BC. Punt was believed to supply rare commodities such as gold, aromatic resins, and exotic animals. Ironically, the exact location of Punt remains unknown to this day. There is also a theory suggesting that Punt and Adulis might actually be the same place, given their similarities in timeline, geography, and archaeological evidence. Others strongly disagree, arguing that they were entirely separate locations, leaving the journey of these baboons still full of unanswered gaps. Beyond their origin, the cultural significance of these mummies in ancient Egyptian society is equally thought-provoking. To the ancient Egyptians, baboons were not ordinary animals. They were considered sacred and closely associated with Thoth, the god of wisdom, knowledge, and writing. For this reason, mummifying baboons was not merely about preservation. It was a ritual offering with deep religious meaning. These animals may have been specially raised for ceremonial purposes and then sacrificed as a way to honor the gods. When you look at the entire story, it becomes clear that this is far more than a simple archaeological discovery. It is a convergence of science, history, religion, and enduring mystery. Shattered skeletons, found in an ancient English village. The ancient village of Warham, Percy, one of the largest and best-preserved medieval settlements ever discovered in England, once thrived between the 12th and 14th centuries when the Percy Earls resided there. But by the 16th century, the entire village was mysteriously abandoned. No one knows exactly why. It wasn't until archaeologists returned centuries later that the first clues began to emerge, though in a way no one expected. During excavations, they uncovered numerous graves. That in itself was not unusual. What was strange and deeply unsettling were the skeletons inside. According to archaeologists, many of the remains had been deliberately broken. These were not fractures caused by time or natural decay, but by intentional human action. The bones had been snapped, cut, and crushed into multiple fragments. So why would people in the past do this to the dead? The answer lies in the dark beliefs of the medieval period. Historical records and folklore from that time suggest that people believed certain individuals could return after death, not in a peaceful or spiritual sense, but as physical, wandering corpses that roamed villages, spreading disease and attacking the living. Sound familiar? It's very similar to modern zombie stories. But to medieval communities, this wasn't fiction. They believed that those who had committed wrongdoing in life would not rest in peace. Instead, they would return to harm the living. And to prevent that from happening, people carried out a practice that sounds horrifying today. They destroyed the bodies. Researchers found that these skeletons date back to between the 11th and 14th centuries. Some remains even showed signs of burning, suggesting that the bodies may have been partially cremated before the remaining bones were smashed. It didn't stop there. Many of the skeletons also bore cut marks, indicating that the bodies had been dismembered before being further processed. A very clear sequence emerges: cut, burn, and break. All of this was done to ensure that the dead would never return. However, scientists have clarified an important point. This is not evidence of cannibalism, despite early suspicions. The damage patterns on the bones do not match those associated with food consumption. Instead, they align with ritualistic or preventative actions. A research team from the University of Southampton analyzed a total of 137 skeletons found at the site and determined that at least 10 of them showed clear signs of having been treated in this way. Dental analysis also revealed that most of these individuals were locals. In other words, these were not outsiders. They were members of the community itself. Imagine living in a society where, when someone dies, the living fear their return so much that they feel compelled to destroy the body. What does that say about the nature of fear at the time? Doesn't it suggest that the anxieties of medieval society were not only about disease or war, but also about invisible beliefs deeply rooted in the human mind? For more than 60 years, archaeologists have used modern technologies to study Warren Percy and uncover the reasons behind its abandonment. But the deeper they dig, the more they realize that this place is not just an ancient settlement. It is a vivid portrait of fear, belief, and how people in the medieval world confronted death. And in the end, one question still remains. Were these shattered skeletons simply the result of superstition, or the remnants of a deeper fear that once gripped an entire village? 1,000-year-old ghost village awakens. After nearly 30 years beneath a lake in Italy. Hey, let me ask you something. If I told you there was once an entire village, a place where people lived, with houses, roads, and even a church, all submerged underwater, and then decades later, when the water receded, everything reappeared almost perfectly intact, as if time had never existed, would you believe it? Probably not. In fact, many people would think that sounds like pure fiction, right? But this actually happened in Italy, specifically in the ancient village of Fabrice di Caragine, located in Lucca province in the Tuscany region. For decades, it has been known as a ghost village. The story begins in 1946, when a major decision was made. Local authorities approved the construction of a hydroelectric dam, creating Lake Vagli right on top of the village. That meant the entire settlement of Fabrice di Caragine, a village that had existed for nearly 1,000 years, would be completely submerged. The residents were forced to leave their homes and relocate to a nearby settlement called Vagli di Sotto. From that moment on, the old village disappeared from the map, resting silently beneath tens of millions of cubic yards of cold water. But what makes this story truly extraordinary isn't just the fact that a village was submerged. It's what happened afterward. After 27 years beneath the lake, most people assumed everything below had been completely destroyed. But the truth turned out to be the exact opposite. On several rare occasions when Lake Vagli was drained, Fabrice di Caragine rose again, and what appeared left everyone in awe. Stone houses were still standing. The old bridge remained intact. The cemetery, narrow streets, and especially the Church of San Teodoro, all of it was remarkably well preserved. The only visible difference was a thick layer of green moss covering everything. Yet that very layer of moss made the village even more mysterious, like stepping into a forgotten world frozen in time. Since being submerged in 1946, the village has reappeared only 4 times: in 1958, 1974, 1983, and 1994. Each time, thousands of people traveled there to witness this ghost town emerging from beneath the water. Because of these rare and fleeting appearances, Fabrice di Caragine earned its haunting nickname. Since 1994, it has disappeared once again, unseen for nearly 3 decades. According to various sources, Italian authorities have repeatedly considered draining Lake Vagli to turn the site into a unique tourist destination. There have even been signs that the lake could be emptied again, offering a rare opportunity for modern visitors to rediscover the untouched beauty of Fabrice di Caragine. In a notable statement, Lorenza Giorgi, the daughter of former mayor Ilio Domenico Giorgi, revealed that the last drainage in 1994 attracted more than 1 million visitors. This shows the incredible appeal of the village, even though it only appears for a short time. Today, Lake Valai is still used as a reservoir and even plays an important role in firefighting efforts. However, the energy company Enel, which manages the lake, has confirmed that discussions are ongoing about tourism development plans, including the possibility of cleaning and draining the lake again in the future. If that happens, Fabrice di Caragine will awaken once more, and when it does, you may have the chance to walk along stone paths that have slept for decades, touch moss-covered walls, and witness a piece of history that once seemed lost forever. Here's something few people know. Before it was submerged, this village was home to blacksmiths and was established in the 12th century. Sitting at an elevation of about 2,900 feet above sea level, Fabrice di Caragine once housed around 150 residents, with 31 homes and a stone church, a small but vibrant community. And now, after centuries of existence and decades beneath the water, the village is still there, almost perfectly preserved. The 100-year-old blinking mummy in Italy. Just imagine this. What if one day you stood in front of a glass coffin and inside was the body of a little girl who had died more than 100 years ago, but her eyes seemed to gently tremble as if she were blinking? How would you feel? Chilled to the bone or overwhelmed with curiosity? If you can't quite picture it, then come with me to the Capuchin catacombs in Italy, because this place holds a story exactly like that. A story that sounds like something out of a horror film, yet is a real mystery that leaves thousands of visitors standing frozen in awe every year. Yes, the central figure in this story is Rosalia Lombardo, often called the Sleeping Beauty. Even the name sounds both beautiful and tragic, doesn't it? Tragic because, despite having rested for over a century, she still appears almost exactly as she did in life. Innocent, with chubby cheeks, nearly intact skin, and long eyelashes gently closed as if she were in a deep sleep. Her soft blonde hair is still tied with a small silk bow, making it hard for anyone to believe she is a mummy. Rosalia died at just under 2 years old on December 2, 1920, shortly before her birthday. The cause of death is believed to have been pneumonia, and many experts suggest it may have been linked to the Spanish flu pandemic, one of the deadliest outbreaks in human history in 1918. After losing his daughter, her grieving father sought out Alfredo Salafia, a renowned embalming specialist in Palermo at the time, with one wish: to preserve his daughter's body for as long as possible. The result was a masterpiece that astonished the world. Today, Rosalia lies in a glass coffin inside the Catacombe dei Cappuccini, a site that houses around 8,000 mummies. Her coffin is filled with nitrogen gas to minimize environmental impact, allowing her body to remain in near-perfect condition. But what makes this place truly famous is not just her appearance. It's the strange phenomenon that many visitors have reported and debated for years, the so-called blinking. Numerous people claim they have seen her eyes slightly open and close again. This has turned Rosalia into the center of intense debate. Some believe her body is haunted, while others think it's merely an illusion. Naturally, the mystery has drawn significant scientific attention. Many scientists have come to investigate, and several explanations have been proposed. The most widely accepted theory is that the effect is caused by changes in temperature and humidity inside the catacombs. Because her eyelids were never fully sealed, slight environmental shifts can cause them to contract or expand subtly. Another explanation suggests that light entering the coffin from different angles may create an optical illusion, making it appear as though her eyes are opening. Dario Piombino Mascali, the curator of the catacombs, has also stated that this is simply a lighting effect, not anything supernatural. However, not everyone is convinced. Some have even speculated that Rosalia's real body was replaced with an incredibly lifelike wax figure. It sounds plausible after all. How could a body remain so perfectly preserved for over 100 years? But when X-ray examinations were conducted, the truth surprised everyone. Inside, her skeletal structure, internal organs, and even her brain were still present, although the brain had shrunk to about half its normal size. This confirmed that the body is authentic, not a replica, completely ruling out the wax figure theory. So where does the real secret lie? The answer is found in Alfredo Salafia's embalming formula, a method that remained a mystery for nearly a century. It wasn't until 2009 that researchers were able to reconstruct it from Salafia's family records. The embalming solution included formalin to kill bacteria, glycerin to retain moisture, salicylic acid to prevent mold, and most importantly, zinc salts, an ingredient that helped prevent decomposition and preserve the body's form almost like a perfect wax statue. And so, year after year, Rosalia Lombardo lies there as if she were simply asleep, as if she had never truly left this world. Every year, thousands of people from around the globe come to witness this century-long sleep with their own eyes. Some are moved to tears, others feel a chill run down their spine. What about you? If you stood before that glass coffin, would you dare to watch long enough to see if those eyes might blink again? If your answer is yes, then you're truly brave. Because for me, every time I look at this mummy, my heart tightens and I feel like I could burst into tears. That little girl's story is just too heartbreaking. 1,000-year-old mummy in the US, with 2.6 pounds of feces and undigested grasshoppers inside. It may sound hard to believe, but archaeological discoveries aren't always dazzling or glorious. Some stories, the deeper you dig, the more unsettling they become, because they're too real, too painful, and deeply haunting. A powerful example comes from 1937, when archaeologists in South Texas accidentally discovered the mummy of a man dating back around 1,000 years. At first, they assumed it was simply a case of natural mummification, something not uncommon in dry climates like this region. The body had dried out over time, nothing particularly unusual. But in 2003, when more advanced scientific methods were applied, the true secret inside this mummy began to emerge. And what they found was far from ordinary. A research team led by scientist Carl Reinhard conducted a deeper analysis and published their findings in a medical journal. Inside the mummy's abdomen, they discovered a mass of dried feces weighing up to 2.6 pounds. Yes, you heard that right. More than 2 pounds. Not only that, but the intestines were filled with fragmented fecal material containing tiny plant structures known as phytoliths, microscopic remnants from plants that the human body cannot fully digest. This clearly indicates one thing: the man's digestive system had been severely impaired for a long time. The internal pressure in his intestines had built up to the point where everything essentially became frozen in place. Just imagine living in that condition. How painful it must have been. Scientists later reached a conclusion that made the story even more tragic. This man may have suffered from extreme constipation for most of his life. His digestive system could no longer function properly, preventing his body from absorbing nutrients, leading to prolonged malnutrition. But the root cause may go even deeper. Evidence suggests that the mummy may have been affected by Chagas disease, caused by the parasite Trypanosoma cruzi. This disease can severely disrupt the digestive system, often causing the colon to expand far beyond its normal size. In this case, researchers estimate that his colon may have enlarged to as much as 6 times its normal size, an astonishing and horrifying figure. With such a condition, the man would have struggled to eat normally, and even simple movement would have been extremely difficult. His body would have gradually weakened over time. And there's one more small detail, yet incredibly meaningful, that gave scientists pause. Inside the stomach, they found undigested grasshoppers. This led to a deeply emotional hypothesis. In his final days, when he was too weak to feed himself, his family and loved ones may have tried to give him anything they could, even live grasshoppers, in a desperate attempt to keep him alive. But in the end, his body could no longer endure. At this point, you probably no longer see this as just a mummy, do you? It becomes the story of a real human being, someone who lived, who suffered prolonged pain, and who was surrounded by people who tried to save him until his very last moments. Rare mummified dinosaur discovered in Canada with remarkably preserved skin. For a long time, most of us have believed that after tens of millions of years since dinosaurs disappeared from Earth, what humans usually find are just scattered, dry, incomplete bones buried underground. But this time, it's different. Scientists didn't just find a small bone fragment. They uncovered a large portion of a dinosaur's body that is almost intact, even preserving traces of its skin. This discovery took place in Canada, specifically in Dinosaur Provincial Park in Alberta, one of the richest dinosaur fossil sites in the world. In 2021, during a routine survey, a volunteer from the University of Reading in the United Kingdom spotted part of a fossilized dinosaur bone exposed on a cliff. At first glance, it looked like many other finds, just a piece of bone sticking out of the rock. But the more closely they examined it, the more they realized something was unusual. This wasn't just a single bone. It included part of the tail and the right hind leg of a dinosaur. Even more importantly, its size and position suggested that the entire skeleton might still be preserved inside the cliff. Do you realize how significant that is? A complete dinosaur skeleton is already extremely rare, but in this case, scientists suspect that not only the bones, but also skin impressions may have been preserved, almost like a dinosaur mummy. Based on the exposed parts, experts believe the animal likely belonged to the hadrosaur group, also known as duck-billed dinosaurs, large herbivores that lived tens of millions of years ago. But what truly makes this discovery extraordinary is not just the species, it's the state of preservation. According to researchers, many of the exposed fossil sections show clear evidence of skin impressions, patterns on the dinosaur's skin that have been preserved. This is incredibly rare because during fossilization, soft tissues like skin usually decay completely. Dr. Caleb Brown from the Royal Tyrrell Museum explained that if the skin is indeed well preserved, it could help us better visualize what dinosaurs actually looked like, not just as dry skeletons like the ones we've always seen. At this point, doesn't everything start to feel more alive? No longer just white bones displayed in museums, but a real creature that once had skin, shape, and presence, something much closer to life. And there's more. Dr. Brian Pickles from the University of Reading offered an interesting insight. Based on the size of the tail and hind leg, he believes this dinosaur may have been a juvenile when it died. That makes the discovery even more valuable. Juvenile dinosaur fossils are extremely rare. Finding one could help scientists better understand how these creatures grew and developed, something that has long been a major gap in fossil records. Currently, major institutions such as the University of Reading, UK, the University of New England, Australia, and the Royal Tyrrell Museum, Canada, are working together to return to the site for further excavation and detailed study. But the work is far from easy. Every step must be handled with extreme care, because even a small mistake could damage these precious fossils. At the same time, scientists are trying to determine whether the skeleton inside is truly complete and how much of the skin has been preserved. Another crucial detail is the skull. Only by finding the skull can they accurately identify the exact species of this dinosaur. And given the size and complexity of the fossil, the research process could take many years. So yes, you may have to wait quite a while before this dinosaur mummy is fully revealed to the public. But even now, the discovery is enough to capture global scientific attention. Because for the first time in tens of millions of years, we're not just seeing dinosaur bones. We may be getting closer than ever to seeing what they actually looked like. Isn't that incredible? And what about you? Are you, like me, excitedly waiting to see what a truly reconstructed dinosaur might look like when it finally comes back to life in our understanding? 2,000-year-old Rainbow Cup treasure carrying ancient legends in Germany. Did you know there's an ancient European legend that says wherever a rainbow touches the ground, mysterious gifts are left behind? Not gemstones or glittering fairy tale treasure, but small curved gold coins with a very unusual name, rainbow cups. It may sound like folklore, But here's the surprising part. These rainbow cups actually exist. In 2017, in Brandenburg, a state in northeastern Germany, a discovery caught the attention of the archaeological world. It wasn't just a single coin or a few scattered pieces, but an entire hoard of gold dating back more than 2,000 years. The treasure was found by Wolfgang Hercht, a volunteer archaeologist working with the Brandenburg State Museum of Archaeology and Heritage Management. At first, he discovered about 10 gold coins, but after reporting the find and conducting a more careful excavation, the total rose to 41 coins, a number that surprised everyone. All of them had a slightly curved shape, unlike flat, typical coins. This unique feature is why they're called rainbow cups. According to legend, they appear where a rainbow touches the earth or fall from the sky, bringing luck, and were even believed to have healing powers. And think about it. Over 2,000 years ago, when science was still in its infancy, discovering strangely shaped gold coins like these would almost certainly lead people to believe they were gifts from another world. You probably would have thought the same, but for scientists, the real question isn't the legend. It's the true origin of these coins. Based on their weight and size, experts determined that the hoard dates back to around 125 to 30 BC during the Late Iron Age. This was also a period when Celtic culture flourished, a powerful ancient civilization that spread across much of Europe. From Britain, France, Belgium, Switzerland, and Austria to southern Germany and even modern-day Czechia, the Celts left their mark across vast regions. But here's the strange part. The Celts didn't live in Brandenburg. So why would a Celtic gold treasure be found there? That's exactly what makes this discovery so remarkable. It suggests that more than 2,000 years ago, Europe had a far more extensive trade network than we once believed. These coins may have reached Brandenburg through trade, exchange, or perhaps through a journey that remains unknown to this day. Among the 41 gold coins, 19 are known as staters, each about 0.8 inches in diameter and weighing around 0.26 ounces. The remaining 22 are smaller coins, called quarter staters, measuring about 0.55 inches and weighing around 0.06 ounces. Each coin is not only valuable in material terms, but also a piece of history. Wolfgang Hercht, the man who discovered the treasure, shared that this was one of those rare moments an archaeologist might experience only once in a lifetime. A discovery that not only holds scientific value, but also helps illuminate the history of an entire region. Yet even with its age, cultural origin, and structure identified, the greatest mystery remains unsolved. Why was such a large treasure buried in Brandenburg? Who hid it there, and why did they never return to retrieve it? It could have belonged to a merchant, a warrior, or perhaps it's part of a story lost to time. No one knows for sure. All we do know is that after more than 2,000 years, these rainbow cups have reappeared, not at the end of a rainbow, but right beneath the feet of modern humans. And now, it's up to scientists to uncover the truth behind their mystery. 5,000-year-old observatory on the Lover's Rock in Spain, where ancient people tracked the sun. In an ancient landscape of Spain, there stands a massive rock formation that looks exactly like a person lying asleep. From a distance, you can clearly make out the shape of a head, chest, and body, as if it were a giant turned to stone in the middle of nature. Locals call it La Peña de los Enamorados, or more simply, the Lover's Rock. But what makes this place truly special isn't its unusual shape. It's what lies right on the chest of that rock. At an elevation of about 2,900 feet, there is an ancient structure known as the White Tomb. For a long time, people assumed it was simply an ordinary ancient burial site. But recently, an excavation led by Professor Leonardo Garcia San Juan from the University of Seville revealed a surprising truth. This site is not just a tomb, it may also be an early form of an astronomical observatory. At this point, you might be wondering, how can a tomb be connected to astronomy? At first, that question puzzled many people, but when scientists carefully analyzed every detail, they realized that everything inside this structure had been deliberately arranged. From the placement of the stones, the orientation of the entrance, to the layout of the interior space, all of it relates to the movement of the sun and astronomical events. The oldest stone elements of this structure date back to around 3000 BC, about 5,000 years ago, during the Neolithic period. Around the same time, burial pottery was also placed here. Initially, bodies may have been laid on a large flat stone platform, After decomposition, the bones were moved toward the back of the platform. In that area, archaeologists discovered 45 teeth and 95 bone fragments, the remains of individuals who were once buried here. But what's fascinating is that this structure was not used just once. Around 2500 BC, the tomb was upgraded. 2 stone burial chambers were added, likely intended for a high-status male and female. Later on, the structure was modified again. New stone blocks were added, the entrance was sealed, and more remains were placed inside, including at least 2 children and 3 women. This means the White Tomb was used across 3 different phases before being completely sealed sometime between 1950 and 1180 BC, a history spanning thousands of years. And there's another detail that truly amazed scientists. When studying the overall structure, they discovered that the circular stone arrangements and the layout of the tomb align perfectly with the function of a primitive observatory. In other words, this was not just a place for the dead. It was also a place where the living observed the sky. In fact, all the stone flooring inside the tomb is aligned with the direction of the sunrise on June 21st, the summer solstice, the longest day of the year. Do you realize what that means? It means that 5,000 years ago, humans were already capable of determining the position of the sun with such precision that they could construct an entire structure aligned with one of the most important astronomical events of the year. This suggests they not only had knowledge of astronomy, but may have used this place for rituals connected to the sun, agricultural cycles, and the passage of time, a place that was simultaneously a tomb, an observatory, and a sacred space. The more we learn, the more we realize that the Lover's Rock is not just a strange natural formation. It is part of a complex system of architecture and belief, where ancient people connected the earth, the sky, and death itself. And when you stand there, watching the sunrise align exactly as it did 5,000 years ago, you may feel something unusual, that perhaps, even without modern technology, ancient people understood the universe in their own way, and with remarkable accuracy. So if you ever had the chance to stand on the Lover's Rock on the summer solstice and watch the sun rise just as ancient people once did, would you feel like you were touching a secret that has existed for 5,000 years? Or would you see it differently? If you have your own thoughts, leave them in the comments below. Let's talk about it together. 300-year-old mummy in China, a perfect body that changed strangely just hours after the coffin was opened. You know, there are archaeological discoveries that amaze people at first glance, but there are also cases that become more unsettling the longer you look. And the story from Xiangcheng, Henan Province, China, is one of those examples. This discovery took place recently when Chinese archaeologists conducted an excavation in a central region of the country. During the dig, they uncovered 3 ancient bodies. However, what drew the team's special attention was one particular body, a corpse that had been preserved in an almost perfect state for about 300 years. Based on initial assessments, this was the body of a man who lived during the Qing dynasty, approximately 1644 to 1912. The clothing still remaining on the body suggested that he may have been a high-ranking official, someone of status in society at that time. But what made this mummy truly remarkable was not just his identity. It was what happened immediately after the coffin was opened. At first, when the lid was lifted, the face of the body appeared almost normal. There were no clear signs of decomposition, and the skin still retained the structure of someone who had died not long ago. Just imagine a body that had lain undisturbed for 300 years, yet still looked like that. It's enough to send chills down your spine. But what followed was even more disturbing. Within just a few hours of exposure to the air, everything about the body began to change. The skin on the face gradually turned dark, a foul odor started to spread, and the process quickly extended to the rest of the body. In a very short time, the initially perfect corpse visibly deteriorated, as if time had been compressed and then suddenly released all at once. This phenomenon led scientists to ask, what allowed this body to remain so well preserved for centuries, and why did it deteriorate so rapidly once exposed to the outside environment? To answer this, archaeologist Dr. Lucas Nickel suggested that ancient people may have used a highly specialized preservation method. The body was placed inside a large, sturdy coffin, sealed tightly with lacquer, and notably covered with a layer of charcoal. This charcoal layer likely acted as a natural barrier, preventing bacteria from entering and keeping the internal environment almost completely isolated from the outside world. As a result, the body did not decompose in the usual way. However, it was precisely this perfect isolation that caused the rapid change. Once the coffin was opened, the body was immediately exposed to air, bacteria, and humidity, triggering a swift deterioration process within just a few hours. To support this explanation, Dr. Lucas Nickel also pointed to another similar case discovered in China. But to explore that case, we need to go back to 2011 in Jiangsu Province, China. At that time, archaeologists uncovered another remarkably well-preserved body buried about 6.5 feet underground. Astonishingly, from head to toe, the body showed almost no signs of damage. The skin still had elasticity, and even the fingernails remained intact. Studies revealed that this was the body of a woman approximately 4 feet 11 inches tall, who lived during the Ming Dynasty, around 1368 to 1644. Calculations indicated that the mummy was nearly 700 years old and likely belonged to the noble class. Her remains were also found in an almost intact tomb and placed inside an extremely solid coffin. In fact, to examine what was inside, experts had to use a saw to cut through the coffin's outer layer because it was so hard. After conducting tests and analysis, the research team discovered that the hard outer coating surrounding the coffin was a mixture of materials, including glutinous rice, lime, sand, and egg whites. Based on this finding, they consulted ancient records and learned that during the Ming Dynasty, it was common to apply layers of mortar around coffins. With just a few layers, the coffin would become incredibly solid. This type of mortar was typically made from sand, paste, and lime, very similar to what scientists had identified. Thanks to this method, the body inside could remain almost perfectly preserved over time. Additionally, inside these coffins, substances such as lime powder, rush grass, and aromatic materials were often placed. These materials helped absorb moisture and prevent the body from decomposing. All of this reveals something fascinating. It wasn't only ancient Egypt that mastered body preservation. In ancient China, people also developed highly effective methods to preserve the dead, though their techniques were entirely different. And that raises an interesting question: what other secrets from the past are still waiting to be uncovered? 900-year-old castle beneath a prison yard. People often say that the earth never forgets what has happened upon it. Sometimes, all it takes is a single shovel strike for the past to rise back to the surface, so clearly that it leaves us stunned. And the story in Gloucester, England is a vivid example of that idea. It began when plans were being made to redevelop an old prison site. As part of the process, researchers conducted a routine survey of the land, just like any other project. There was nothing unusual at first, no warning signs, nothing to suggest what lay beneath. But as the first layers of soil were removed, ancient stones began to appear, and everything quickly exceeded expectations. An archaeological team from Cotswold Archaeology uncovered the wall of a tower belonging to a 12th century castle. These were not just scattered fragments, but clearly defined structures, enough to reconstruct the scale of what was once a royal-style complex. Just imagine, beneath the yard of a prison, a place associated with confinement and harsh realities, there once stood a powerful symbol of the medieval era. It sounds almost unbelievable, doesn't it? What made the discovery even more remarkable was the nearly 900 artifacts found at the site. From broken pieces of pottery to intact bone dice, these objects seem to whisper stories from nearly 900 years ago. These small items are key to understanding daily life inside the castle: what people ate, how they entertained themselves, and how they lived. A lost world is now gradually coming back into focus, piece by piece. According to Neil Holbrook, archaeologist and director of the company, he and his team could hardly hide their surprise. They knew there had once been a castle in the area, but had always believed it had been completely destroyed. What they discovered proved the opposite. History doesn't disappear. It simply lies hidden, waiting to be found. In fact, Gloucester once had not one but two medieval castles. The first was built to the east of what is now the prison site, and it was later replaced around the year 1110 by a stronger stone structure. Notably, the tower that was just discovered is comparable in size to one of the towers in the Tower of London complex. This suggests that the structure was not small. It may have played a significant role in its historical context. However, the castle's fate did not last forever. In 1787, it was completely demolished. The towering walls and once bustling spaces vanished from sight. Then, just a few years later, in 1791, Gloucester Prison began receiving its first inmates. From that point on, the remains of the castle were buried beneath the prison yard, fading into obscurity for more than 2 centuries. For over 200 years, countless footsteps passed across this ground, yet no one knew that beneath them lay a vast piece of history. On one side was the glorious past of the nobility. On the other, the harsh present of imprisoned lives. 2 contrasting worlds coexisted on the same piece of land. Today, archaeologists say all of these findings will be carefully analyzed and preserved before redevelopment of the prison moves forward. But one thing is certain, from now on, every step taken across the yard of Gloucester Prison will feel different, because beneath it lies a silent, magnificent past waiting to be told. 1,000-year-old mummy beaten to death. You know, history has always been mysterious, so deeply marked by pain and unanswered questions that many events remain beyond explanation, especially deaths that occurred hundreds or even thousands of years ago. Some deaths are remembered for generations, while others are never told until science finally gives them a voice. This time, the story doesn't begin at a bloody crime scene, but with a mummy that lay silently in a museum for centuries. A young man who lived more than 1,000 years ago, seemingly forgotten, suddenly speaks, revealing the final moments of his life in a way no one expected. The story begins in a research facility at Bogenhausen Hospital, where experts examined an ancient mummy displayed at the Anatomical Museum in Marburg, Munich, Germany. At first glance, it appeared to be nothing more than a well-preserved body. But once modern technology came into play, everything began to change. The man was identified as belonging to the Arica culture, a civilization that once lived in what is now northern Chile. Based on the objects buried with him, researchers believe he was a member of a fishing community, a simple life tied to the sea and daily survival. But what caught the scientists' attention was not just where he came from, it was how he died. Using 3D CT scanning technology, a method that allows researchers to see inside the body without damaging the mummy, they began reconstructing every detail. From bone structure to signs of trauma, everything became clearly visible, and the picture that emerged was chilling. The man died at around 20 to 25 years old, with an estimated height of about 5 feet 8 inches. After death, he was buried in a squatting position, a burial style common in many ancient cultures. Some of his teeth remained intact, showing wear patterns typical of people who consumed corn over long periods. This further supported theories about his daily life. Then, the unusual details began to appear. His lungs showed signs of severe tuberculosis, a dangerous disease at the time. However, this illness was not the cause of death. So what actually ended his life? The answer lay in his skull and spine. Analysis revealed that he had suffered an extremely powerful blow to the head, enough to cause almost immediate death. But it didn't stop there. A deep stab wound in his back indicated that he was attacked again while either standing or kneeling. These injuries were not accidental, they were clear signs of violence. In other words, this was undeniably a homicide. Based on historical analysis, researchers believe the attack occurred sometime between 996 and 1147. The assailant may have been one or two individuals, and their actions were swift and decisive, leaving the victim no chance to defend himself. A brutal and terrifying act even after more than 1,000 years. 3,300-year-old coffin, carved with a human face. Some discoveries make people freeze for a few seconds, not because they're massive, but because every small detail hints at a story so deep it sends chills down your spine. And this time, in the sun-scorched land of Israel, archaeologists uncovered something that instantly sparks curiosity. A clay coffin dating back about 3,300 years with a lid sculpted into a human face. Yes, you heard that right. A coffin not only meant for burial, but one that bears the face of the deceased, as if they are still gazing back at the world from beyond death. Just thinking about it is enough to give you goosebumps. This coffin was discovered in the Jezreel Valley, a region known for its many overlapping layers of history. When researchers opened it, they found the skeleton of an adult inside. But what truly caught their attention were the objects buried alongside the body. Right next to the skeleton was a gold ring, and on that ring was not just any design. It bore the name of an ancient Egyptian pharaoh, Seti I, who ruled Egypt from 1290 to 1279 BCE. during a time when Egyptian power was expanding far beyond its traditional borders. Not only did the ring carry his name, but it was also associated with a gold seal engraved with a cobra, an iconic symbol of power in ancient Egyptian culture. Seals like this were typically used to stamp important documents, much like a signature of someone in authority. From these details, experts from the Israel Antiquities Authority concluded that the person buried here was certainly not of ordinary status. The findings suggest this was a wealthy individual, possibly someone who served in the Egyptian military or worked within the administration of that time. There is also another theory, that this individual may have originated from the region of Canaan, an area that includes present-day Lebanon, Israel, and Palestine, but served under the Egyptian Empire. Now think about that for a moment. A person living in Canaan, yet carrying clear marks of Egyptian power and influence. This points to a strong cultural and political exchange during that era. In fact, during the reign of Pharaoh Seti I, Egypt extended its influence deeply into Canaan, not just through territorial control, but by spreading its culture, beliefs, and customs. And this human-faced coffin is a perfect example. Such coffins were a distinctive burial tradition in ancient Egypt, typically reserved for individuals of high social status. The fact that someone in Canaan was buried in this style suggests not only wealth, but also a close connection to Egyptian civilization. They could have been an officer, an official, or perhaps a bridge between two cultures. But the story doesn't end there. The Jezreel Valley, where the coffin was found, has long been considered an archaeological treasure trove. Previously, researchers uncovered a cemetery dating back to the time of Seti I, along with a headless statue of Hercules, an unusual detail that seems to hint at even more mysteries waiting to be uncovered. When all these discoveries are put together, they form a much larger picture. This is not just a single burial. It may be part of an entire community deeply influenced by ancient Egypt. A coffin, a ring, a seal. They may sound simple, but they are enough to open the door to a story that spans thousands of years. Fascinating, isn't it? So next time you come across an ancient artifact, don't just look at its surface. Dig deeper into the story behind it, because hidden within it could be an entire life, a secret, and a piece of history waiting to be told. Mysterious drawings in a 500-year-old ancient book. An ancient book that seemed to have fallen silent long ago has suddenly begun to speak again, revealing a story that history may have deliberately tried to hide. It sounds unbelievable, doesn't it? But this is a completely true story, beginning with a manuscript over 500 years old known as the Codex Selden. This book originates from the region of Anute in the state of Oaxaca, once a major center of the ancient Mixtec civilization. Among the very few surviving manuscripts from this area, the Codex Selden is considered an extremely valuable living witness. For many years, researchers suspected that something was hidden beneath its pages. The problem was, no one dared to damage such a precious artifact to find out. And so, the secret remained there, right within reach, yet completely out of grasp. That is, until modern technology stepped in. Using hyperspectral imaging, a highly advanced see-through scanning technique, scientists were finally able to detect images hidden beneath the surface text. Without touching or peeling the pages apart, the details gradually came into view. According to Ludo Snyders, a member of the research team from Leiden University, the moment was so astonishing that he almost shouted in disbelief. What appeared were not faint sketches, but an entire system of imagery in a pre-colonial style, completely different from the upper layer of text, which clearly shows European influence. This discovery immediately changed previous assumptions. Before, it was believed that the manuscript had been created around 1560, after Spanish colonization began in the region. But now, it appears to be much older. Just think about it. One hidden layer of drawings could rewrite the entire timeline of a civilization. What makes the story even more fascinating is the content of these images. Although current technology can clearly reveal only red and yellow pigments, and much of the detail remains obscured by a layer of carbon, researchers have identified several recurring symbols. The most notable among them are images of a dagger and a rope. They may sound simple, but in an ancient cultural context, such symbols could carry deep meaning. Some theories suggest that the dagger and rope figure may represent an important individual in Mixtec society, possibly a priest, a leader, or even a king. However, it remains unclear whether these symbols refer to a single person or multiple individuals. In addition, the images depict around 20 figures, sitting and standing, all facing the same direction. Some are holding staffs or spears, and there are also depictions of women with red hair, a rare and intriguing detail. These scenes resemble a larger picture of society, where power, ritual, and daily life are closely intertwined. According to experts, this manuscript functions like a kind of chronicle, recording not only individuals, but also the geopolitical situation of the ancient Mixtec people. This means that if the entire content can be decoded, we may gain a much deeper understanding of how this civilization functioned, from systems of power and territory to social relationships. 3,000-year-old pyramid in the Amazon rainforest. People often think the Amazon rainforest is nothing more than dense vegetation, wild animals, and vast lands untouched by any major civilization. But sometimes, the most remote places hide secrets that force the world to rethink everything it once believed. A powerful example of this dates back to 1976, when a satellite image captured by NASA unexpectedly revealed a strange formation deep within the endless green of the Amazon. It wasn't a river or a natural hill. It was a series of triangular shapes that looked remarkably like pyramids, isolated and nearly impossible to reach by land. At first, many assumed these were natural formations, hills shaped by erosion over time into pyramid-like structures. But some researchers weren't convinced. They believed these formations, often referred to as the Paratawari pyramids, could be the remains of an ancient undocumented civilization. These suspicions gained more weight when expeditions into the Amazon uncovered numerous traces of ancient human activity: stone-paved paths, carved stonework, and the foundations of structures worn down by time. All of it suggested that people once lived here, possibly even a well-developed community. Then, in 2010, a discovery ignited even more debate. During an excavation on what was believed to be just another hill, a team of archaeologists noticed something unusual. The deeper they dug, the clearer it became that the structure was not natural at all. Eventually, they reached a stunning conclusion. It was not a hill. It was a massive pyramid, built more than 3,000 years ago. Yes, a pyramid in the middle of the Amazon. Unexpected, isn't it? But the discoveries didn't stop there. The surrounding area revealed even more intriguing details. Large structures were found nearby, possibly serving as residences or administrative centers for a ruling class. There were also walls nearly 6.5 feet high, seemingly built to protect the area from outside threats. Most curious of all were seashells scattered throughout the site. A strange finding, considering the region is nowhere near the ocean. This raises a series of questions. Where did these shells come from? What were they used for? Decoration? Currency? Or perhaps something tied to ritual practices? Before any clear answers could emerge, researchers made another discovery about 1 mile from the main pyramid, a similar structure. Inside they found the remains of 22 children, a number chilling enough to unsettle anyone. This led to several theories, the most notable being that the site may have been used for sacrificial rituals. The children may have been offered as part of religious ceremonies. Some researchers even draw comparisons to the rituals of the Inca civilization, which was known for its sacrificial practices. If that is true, then this is no longer just an archaeological discovery. It becomes a portrait of a civilization with structure, belief systems, and complex rituals, one that ultimately vanished under mysterious circumstances. So what could have caused an entire civilization to disappear deep within the jungle without leaving clear traces? War? Natural disasters? Or could their own extreme rituals have contributed to their downfall? Even today, no one can say for certain. Everything remains speculation. And those structures, the silent pyramids hidden in the rainforest, continue to guard their secrets. 150 mysterious objects from 1.4-million-year-old early humans. During an excavation at the Ubaydiyah site in northern Israel, one of the oldest locations linked to human presence outside of Africa, archaeologists made a startling discovery: 150 limestone objects shaped into nearly perfect spheres, believed to date back about 1.4 million years. These are not natural stones. They were intentionally shaped, remarkably round, with a level of symmetry that humans would not begin to seriously explore in art or geometry until millions of years later. This raises a fundamental question. Who made them, and why? According to experts, the creators of these objects were likely Homo erectus, also known as upright man. This species is an ancient ancestor of modern humans, with a form that was part human, part ape, still quite primitive in appearance, but already capable of walking upright and using basic tools. However, the existence of these perfectly shaped spheres challenges everything we thought we knew about the technical skill and cognitive ability of early humans. Dr. Antoine Muller of the Hebrew University of Jerusalem explains that researchers are still actively debating their purpose. Some believe these stones were tools used to break larger rocks, suggesting a practical function. Others suspect they may represent an early expression of aesthetic thinking, or even a form of proto-art. What confuses archaeologists the most is the time period itself. Around 1.4 million years ago, humans were believed to be in a very primitive stage. According to traditional theories, early humans could only create sharp stone flakes for cutting, not complex geometric shapes like perfectly rounded spheres. So what does this mean? Could Homo erectus have evolved faster than we previously thought? Or could this be evidence of a cognitive development path that has never been fully recognized? There is also the possibility that these early humans created the spheres unintentionally, through repeated experimentation, without fully understanding what they were doing. But regardless of the explanation, the stone spheres of Ubaidiya remain an unsolved mystery, a distant message from humanity's deep past. In an age where science seems capable of explaining almost everything, the existence of these 1.4 million-year-old objects serves as a powerful reminder. There is still so much about our ancestors that the modern world has yet to understand. The eerie blood jade that left experts pale. Archaeology may seem like a straightforward field, but it is filled with hidden dangers. Tombs of ancient emperors and nobles were often built with secret mechanisms designed to prevent intrusion, so entering them is rarely without risk. Objectively speaking, archaeology is a demanding profession. It requires both deep historical knowledge and exceptional courage. In general, archaeologists are accustomed to strange and unusual discoveries. However, there are always exceptions. One such case involves a piece of blood jade discovered in an ancient tomb in Mao Mountain, China. A find so unsettling that even seasoned archaeologists, seemingly fearless in the face of danger, broke into cold sweats. The discovery of this blood jade was entirely accidental. In 1980, a farmer in Mao Mountain, Jiangsu Province, China, was digging his field when he unexpectedly uncovered an ancient tomb. He immediately reported it to local authorities, and archaeologists were soon called in to conduct a formal excavation. According to experts, the tomb at Mao Mountain was relatively simple in structure and modest in size. It contained several artifacts, but nothing particularly rare or extraordinary at first glance. However, as the excavation was nearing completion, one member of the team noticed an unusual red object. After carefully removing the surrounding dirt, they revealed a smooth, round jade pendant, reddish in color and about the size of an egg. This discovery sparked immediate curiosity. Who did it belong to, and where did it come from? After a period of research and consultation of historical records, experts confirmed that it was a piece of blood jade, a rare and highly valued material in ancient Chinese feudal society. In Chinese history, blood jade was considered extremely special, reserved only for the wealthy, the nobility, and the royal family. It was not just a symbol of status and wealth, but also believed to be a protective talisman, bringing peace, luck, and safety to its owner. Wealthy individuals and officials often carried jade pendants to ward off evil spirits and protect themselves from danger. However, blood jade followed a very unusual rule. It was meant only for the dead. According to tradition, after a person passed away, their family would place a jade piece into the mouth of the deceased. Over time, the jade would gradually turn red, resembling blood. In folk belief, anyone who dared to remove blood jade from a corpse would face severe misfortune and disasters, possibly even death. In Taoist legends, blood jade was also regarded as a powerful ritual object capable of exorcising evil, and only highly skilled practitioners were believed to be able to use it. This is why blood jade was always carefully protected and typically found only in the tombs of high-status individuals. Despite the many myths surrounding blood jade, stories of supernatural power and spiritual danger, modern science has yet to confirm whether any of these believed effects are real. Even so, This discovery has drawn significant attention from archaeologists and historians. It is not only a rare artifact, but also a reflection of the deep beliefs, customs, and spiritual traditions of ancient people. The blood jade found in the Mao Mountain tomb stands as a vivid testament to the intersection of history, culture, and mythology within a great civilization. Stones that can reproduce and move on their own. At some point, many of us have heard myths about magical stones, rocks that can grow, move, and even reproduce like living creatures. As unbelievable as it sounds, those legends are actually rooted in real phenomena. In the small town of Kosteshti, there exists a truly unusual geological occurrence: stones that literally grow. These potato-shaped rocks have long sparked curiosity among local residents. Researchers believe these unusually spherical stones were formed by intense and prolonged seismic activity during the Middle Miocene period. Shockwaves from powerful earthquakes compressed sandy sediments and cemented limestone materials into rounded masses known as trove. But what makes these stones appear to grow, move, and even reproduce? To answer that, scientists have studied their structure and behavior. Trove consist of a hard stone core surrounded by layers of sand or gravel. These unique formations can only develop in highly porous sandy deposits and sandstone bound together by water rich in calcium carbonate. Calcium carbonate is essential not only in forming troves, but also in enabling them to grow when exposed to rainwater. After heavy rainfall, troves absorb minerals from the water. These minerals then chemically interact with substances already present inside the stone, creating internal pressure. This pressure causes the stone to expand outward from its center, essentially growing and even appearing to reproduce at a rate of about 1.5 to 2 inches every 1,000 years. Troves typically have smooth surfaces with no sharp edges and can appear in cylindrical or spherical shapes. The irregular secretion of natural cement causes them to grow into inconsistent and unusual forms over time. Their size can vary greatly, from just a few millimeters to as large as about 33 feet. But beyond their structure and ability to grow, it is their apparent reproduction that makes troves truly unique. They also seem capable of moving from one place to another, and if that's not strange enough, they can develop root-like extensions and display growth rings visible when the stone is cut. Even today, scientists cannot fully explain these unusual features. From a visual standpoint, troves appear to combine characteristics of both plants and stones, making it unclear whether they should be classified as living organisms or not. But regardless of whether they are alive, these growing stones create a remarkable sight, one that you simply shouldn't miss if you ever visit Valsia County in Romania. 2,300-year-old temple reveals the secrets of a forgotten ancient Buddhist center. There are places that once stood at the heart of entire civilizations, only to be erased by time until no one remembers them anymore. And sometimes, it's only when layers of earth are peeled back that history begins to reappear, so clearly that it forces us to rethink everything we thought we knew. And believe it or not, a story like that has just unfolded in the Swat district of northwestern Pakistan, where archaeologists have discovered an ancient temple dating back about 2,300 years. The excavation took place in Bazira, an area within the town of Barakat in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa province, long referred to as the ancient world and traditions. Even the name suggests how important this place once was, but only when the ruins began to emerge did its true significance become clear. What makes this discovery remarkable is not just the temple's age, but the fact that it may be even older than many sites found in Taxila, one of the most famous centers of Buddhism in the region. Just imagine, a site older than places already considered the cradle of Buddhism. That alone speaks volumes about its historical value. During the excavation, archaeologists uncovered a statue of the Buddha standing about 13 feet tall, still relatively well preserved despite being more than 2 millennia old. In addition, they found traces of an ancient roadway, possibly the main road leading into the old city of Bazira, directly connected to its gates. These details suggest that this was once a thriving, well-planned urban area, not just an isolated religious site. According to Luca M. Olivieri, director of the MAIP Archaeological Mission, the foundation of the temple dates back to the Mauryan Empire, a period when Buddhism was rapidly spreading and gaining influence. He noted that this discovery is extremely significant because it demonstrates the existence of a new architectural technique within Gandharan Buddhist art, a style that blends Greek and Indian influences. Previously, this type of architecture had only been documented at a temple in Sirkap, but now the temple in Basira stands as the oldest and most representative example of this style in Pakistan. It's almost like discovering an original version of a long-lost architectural tradition. But the significance doesn't stop there. Basira was once part of the Gandhara civilization, a region that played a crucial role in spreading Buddhism throughout Central Asia. It was also the birthplace of many artistic symbols of Buddhism that we still recognize today. In other words, this was not just a stop along the way, it was a major center for cultural and religious exchange. Archaeological evidence also shows that Basira welcomed Indo-Greek communities at a very early stage, particularly during the reign of Menander I Soter, a king well known for supporting Buddhism. This reflects a powerful cultural exchange between civilizations and helps explain why Buddhism flourished so rapidly in this region. From around the 3rd century BCE, Basira had already become an important Buddhist center. By the 3rd to 4th century CE, it had reached its peak, but like many civilizations, it could not escape the destructive forces of nature. A powerful earthquake reduced the area to ruins during the Kushan Empire under rulers such as Kanishka and Huvishka, both strong supporters of Buddhism, and over time, everything faded into obscurity. Remains of a new human species discovered in Spain. A recent archaeological discovery in Spain is shaking the global scientific community, not only because of its age, which spans over 1 million years, but also because it reveals an entirely new chapter in the story of human evolution. Led by the Spanish National Research Center on Human Evolution, CNIH, an international research team has announced what they believe to be a missing piece of the puzzle, a previously unknown human species represented by a mysterious individual nicknamed Pink. Pink is not an official scientific name, but rather a nickname given by researchers to this unusual specimen, discovered in 2022 at the famous archaeological site of Atapuerca, located in the limestone mountains of Burgos Province, Spain. The initial discovery consisted of only part of a jawbone and a cheekbone, yet these fragments are now rewriting the entire history of human presence in Europe. Using advanced dating techniques, the research team determined that Pink lived approximately 1.1 to 1.4 million years ago, a time frame that immediately captured the attention of anthropologists worldwide. What's surprising is that Pink's face appears narrow and flat, lacking the more modern features typically seen in ancient human species in Europe from the same period. This has left researchers facing a difficult question: who exactly was Pink? The remains were excavated from the same archaeological layer that contained numerous artifacts associated with Homo ancestor, an ancient human species that lived in Europe roughly 800,000 to 1.2 million years ago. However, when researchers reconstructed the facial structure and compared it to known species, they found that Pink more closely resembled Homo erectus, upright man, a species believed to be a direct ancestor of many modern human lineages and known to have lived in Africa and Asia over 2 million years ago. But the resemblance is not exact. Subtle yet important differences in facial bone structure indicate that Pink is neither Homo erectus nor Homo ancestor. This has led scientists to propose a bold hypothesis. Pink may belong to an entirely new human species, a forgotten evolutionary branch that may have reached Western Europe even earlier than Homo ancestor, and one that has never before been documented in the fossil record. Dr. Maria Martinon Torres, director of CNIH and lead researcher on the project, suggests that Pink's ancestors may not have migrated from Africa via the Strait of Gibraltar, as traditional theories propose. Instead, they may have come from Eastern Europe, along a lesser-discussed route that is increasingly supported by archaeological evidence. Some findings indicate that human activity existed at the gateways to Europe as early as 2 million years ago, suggesting there was ample time for early migration waves to reach Western Europe much earlier than previously believed. At the site where Pink was discovered, archaeologists also found stone tools and animal bones bearing cut marks, clear evidence that early humans knew how to craft and use tools for hunting, butchering, and food preparation. Though primitive, these tools demonstrate a high level of adaptability to a warm, humid environment rich in resources. The discovery of pink has been published in the prestigious scientific journal Nature, sparking widespread interest across the research community. And yet, the story is far from over. Excavations are still ongoing at Atapuerca, a site that may hold even more secrets about the species pink represents. Could this be the missing link in our evolutionary journey? Or is it an entirely separate branch that once coexisted with other early human species, only to go extinct and fade into oblivion? Whatever the answer may be, one thing is clear. Every bone fragment, every artifact uncovered is more than just fossil evidence. It is a whisper from the past, helping us listen to the very beginnings of the human story. The 2,000-year-old skull in Russia that left scientists confused. You know, in the world of archaeology, there are discoveries that amaze people with their beauty and others that send chills down your spine at first sight. And to begin today's story, I'm going to take you to a remote region of Siberia, where an ancient head artifact left scientists puzzled for nearly 40 years before the truth was finally revealed. It all began in 1968 in the Caucasia region of Russia. During an archaeological excavation there, Professor Anatoly Martynov discovered something extremely unusual, a head-shaped object made of clay, featuring the face of a young man. At first glance, it looked like a portrait sculpture, but the more researchers examined it, the more they sensed that something was not right. They realized this wasn't just a normal statue, there was something inside the clay layer. However, at that time, X-ray technology was still quite limited. Scientists could only vaguely detect a skull-like structure inside, along with a small empty space. But the strange thing was that its size did not match a human skull. It was significantly smaller. So what exactly was inside? That question remained unanswered for decades because no one dared to break the outer clay layer. In archaeology, doing so would be equivalent to destroying a priceless artifact. It wasn't until nearly 40 years later, when modern technology had advanced significantly, that scientists returned to study this mysterious head again. This time, they used more advanced methods in hopes of finally finding an answer. And then, the truth was revealed. The X-ray results showed that inside the clay head, there was indeed not a human skull. Instead, it was the skull of a sheep. This discovery shocked the entire archaeological community, because the outer layer was shaped like a human face, detailed enough to resemble a real person, as if it were a reconstruction of someone who had passed away. So why did ancient people do this? According to researchers, this artifact belonged to the Tagar culture, which existed about 2,000 years ago in Siberia, Russia. This was a culture known for extremely complex and unique burial rituals. One of the theories proposed by Professor Natalia Polosmak suggests that this head may have been created to replace a deceased person whose body could not be found. Think about it. If someone disappeared in the forest, drowned, or their body was never recovered, how could their funeral rituals be properly performed? The Tagar people may have used the skull of a sheep, an animal considered sacred, to act as a substitute. Then they recreated a human face using clay, as a way to ensure the deceased's spirit could still make a complete journey to the afterlife. It sounds strange, yet at the same time, there is something deeply human about it, don't you think? However, another theory suggests that this head was not meant for replacement, but for rebirth. In other words, the deceased would begin a new existence, a new life in a different form. And the sheep, an animal revered in many ancient cultures, may have symbolized that rebirth. Some studies even connect this to ancient rituals where the dead were processed in multiple stages: temporary burial, partial decomposition, and then reconstruction of the body using materials like grass, leather, and clay. During this process, if the head was lost or damaged, it would be recreated, and this clay head may be the result of that practice. Of course, all of these theories remain speculation, because to this day, this is the only known case of its kind. There are no comparable samples and no definitive evidence to confirm any explanation. In other words, the mystery remains unsolved. So what do you think ancient people really did with this head? Was it a spiritual ritual, a religious symbol, or something we still do not fully understand? Share your thoughts, because perhaps your perspective might open a completely new way of interpreting this 2,000-year-old mystery. It's very possible. 28 human skeletons with ancient cosmetic surgery found in a 700-year-old tomb in Gabon, Africa. When we talk about cosmetic surgery, most of us immediately think of the modern era: technology, hospitals, and highly advanced facial reconstruction procedures. But what if I told you that more than 700 years ago, in a remote part of Africa, people were already performing interventions on the human body to alter appearance? Would you believe it? If not, then let's travel to a mysterious cave called Irungoy Cave, located in Gabon, Africa. The name Irungoy Cave might not sound particularly special. At first glance, it seems like just another ordinary cave in the jungle, but inside it lies a discovery that has stunned archaeologists. Here, scientists uncovered a total of 28 human skeletons dating back to the 14th and 15th centuries. These remains were preserved in nearly perfect condition, an extremely rare occurrence in Africa, where highly acidic soil usually causes bones to decompose very quickly. Even the leader of the expedition, archaeologist Richard Oslesley, admitted that this was a truly one-of-a-kind discovery. But what shocked him and his team was not the number of skeletons or their state of preservation. It was the faces of the deceased. Upon close examination of the skulls, researchers noticed something unusual. All of them showed signs of deliberate removal of certain molars. And this was not caused by disease or accidents, it was done intentionally. At this point, some of you might already feel a bit unsettled, right? However, this was not an act of torture or punishment. According to experts, it may actually represent a form of ancient cosmetic surgery. The removal of teeth was done to alter facial structure and create a different appearance, possibly one considered more attractive by the standards of that time, or one that held special social meaning. In simple terms, this may have been a marker of status, and this idea becomes even more convincing when we look at what was buried with them. Inside the tomb, archaeologists discovered hundreds of artifacts, including 486 iron objects, 26 bronze items, more than 100 Atlantic seashells, and dozens of animal teeth drilled to be used as jewelry. To us today, these items may not seem especially valuable, but for ancient communities at that time, they were truly a treasure. This suggests that these 28 individuals were not ordinary people. They may have belonged to an elite class, possibly even multiple generations of a tribal leadership family. Just imagine deep in a jungle cave in Africa hundreds of years ago, a group of high-status individuals being buried with elaborate rituals, accompanied by valuable possessions and even physical modifications that reflected their power. It sounds like something out of a movie, doesn't it? But this is real. According to researchers, these bodily modifications could have been driven by various reasons, such as aesthetics, religious beliefs, or even social and sexual factors. However, since there are no written records, all of this remains hypothetical. What makes the story even more fascinating is that we still do not know exactly which culture or ethnic group these people belong to, or why they chose such unusual burial practices. In other words, the mystery remains intact. And that's exactly why history is not always clear-cut. Some stories are buried without explanations, leaving only traces behind, waiting for us to piece them together. So what do you think? Was this facial modification done for beauty, for power, or as part of a spiritual ritual? As for me, I think it might have simply been for beauty. Two mysterious female statues guarding a massive tomb in Greece. Hey, if there is one place in the world where every excavation seems to uncover a secret capable of capturing global attention, where do you think that would be? As for me, I would say without hesitation, Greece. Because this is a land that, hundreds and even thousands of years ago, was already considered the cradle of glorious ancient civilizations. To illustrate this, let's move on to the next discovery, which takes us to a place called Amphipolis, a Greek city founded by the Athenians in eastern Macedonia, along the Strymon River in 438 to 437 BC. The story began when archaeologists started excavating a massive tomb on Costa Hill in the Serres region. From the very beginning, the scale of this structure left people stunned. The tomb has a perimeter of nearly 1,640 feet, with walls around 10 feet high. Most strikingly, it is about 10 times larger than the tomb of Philip II of Macedon, the father of Alexander the Great. Just hearing that alone is enough to tell you this is no ordinary sight, right? And indeed, it wasn't. It took 2 full years of persistent excavation before archaeologists finally discovered the main entrance to the tomb. And right there, they encountered 2 Sphinx statues standing guard, almost as if protecting a highly important secret inside. But what truly intrigued everyone lay beyond that point. As the ceiling wall was removed and the sand inside was gradually cleared, a new chamber was revealed, a vestibule leading to multiple rooms. And at the next entrance, archaeologists discovered two marble female statues carved directly into two large columns. These statues were not only beautiful, but also deeply mysterious. Each one had an arm extended forward, as if trying to stop anyone from entering. The material was identified as high-quality marble sourced from Thassos Island, a place in Greece famous for its pure white stone. Even more intriguingly, traces of red and blue pigment were found on the surface, suggesting that these statues were once brightly painted. This led experts to believe that they may represent korai, female maiden statues commonly found in ancient Greek art from the 7th century to the early 5th century BC. And the discoveries did not stop there. As excavation continued deeper, archaeologists found that the ceiling of the tomb was decorated with a rectangular marble slab, carved with floral patterns and painted in red, yellow, and blue. Every small detail suggested that this was not an ordinary structure, but a resting place for someone extremely important. Another fascinating detail is that the construction of this tomb shares similarities with Egyptian pyramids, from the grand entrance and guardian statues to the use of sand ceiling techniques designed to block intruders. So the biggest question remains: who is buried inside? Could it be a general, a royal family member, or even someone close to Alexander the Great? To this day, none of these questions have been answered. In fact, even solid theories have yet to be proposed because the mystery is simply too deep. So deep that even the Greek government has taken a strong interest in the discovery. Prime Minister Antonis Samaras, along with the Minister of Culture, personally visited the site. He once stated, "Macedonia continues to amaze us as it reveals treasures hidden deep within." However, not everyone sees it positively. Some argue that the large-scale publicity may have political motives, even suggesting that Amphipolis could be turned into an archaeological park to attract tourism. But regardless of the intention, one thing cannot be denied. This site is preserving an extremely important piece of history, and so we can only hope that one day, archaeologists and scientists will uncover the truth and reveal exactly what these two statues were guarding deep within this ancient tomb. The Turkana boy skeleton reveals the athletic build of human ancestors. When we talk about our ancient human ancestors, most of us probably imagine something quite primitive, right? Short bodies, slightly hunched backs, long arms, short legs, looking more like apes than modern humans. But what if I told you that a human species from as far back as 2 million years ago actually had a body shape not very different from today's athletes? Surprising, isn't it? The species I'm referring to is the now extinct Homo erectus, which first appeared on Earth around 2 million years ago. This is one of the most important ancestors in human evolution, yet also one that has been widely misunderstood. For a long time, scientists believed that Homo erectus had a rather bulky and less agile body. However, a new study led by the Natural History Museum in London, United Kingdom, has completely changed that view. The research published in the journal Nature Ecology and Evolution shows that Homo erectus actually had a highly balanced and powerful physique, similar to modern rugby players. In other words, they were not only strong, but also fast, endurance-based, and very agile. They had long legs, which allowed them to run efficiently and travel long distances. Their arms were shorter compared to apes, closer to modern human proportions. And most importantly, their ribcage was wide and deep, giving them strong respiratory capacity, a feature also seen in Neanderthals, another ancient human species known for exceptional physical strength. So why did they develop this kind of body? The answer lies in their environment. Unlike earlier ape-like ancestors that depended on dense forests, Homo erectus adapted to open, dry, and hot savannas. In such landscapes, climbing and hiding were not enough. They had to constantly move to hunt and survive. As a result, long-distance running became a critical survival advantage. Their bodies evolved specifically for that purpose, strong enough to hunt, yet efficient enough to avoid exhaustion. Interestingly, scientists once assumed that adaptation to this environment would lead to taller and slimmer bodies, but the reality turned out to be the opposite. Homo erectus still maintained a robust chest, giving them a true warrior-like physique rather than a thin build. To reach this conclusion, researchers analyzed the skeleton of a particularly important individual known as the Turkana boy. He was discovered in 1984 by Kamoya Kimio at Nariokotomé, near Lake Turkana in Kenya. Although the boy died at a very young age, his skeleton was remarkably well preserved, especially his spine and rib bones. This allowed scientists to reconstruct what his adult body would likely have looked like. Just think about it. From a single small skeleton, we can reconstruct a vivid image of our ancient ancestors. Amazing, right? But the story doesn't end there. According to Dr. Scott Williams from New York University, even though Homo erectus and Neanderthals had impressive physical builds, it is actually the more modest body of modern humans, Homo sapiens, that turned out to be the greatest evolutionary advantage. It may sound counterintuitive, but in reality, our narrower rib cage and more compact pelvis and rib structure help optimize endurance and adaptability across a wide range of environments. This is what allowed Homo sapiens, our direct ancestors, to adapt more successfully and eventually become the only surviving species of the human genus today. So there is a saying that fits perfectly here. It is not always the biggest and strongest that wins. Sometimes, being smaller, faster, and more efficient gives you the ultimate advantage. Smoke-cured mummies in the Philippines, the eerie ritual of the living dead. My friend, if one day you heard about a place where people began mummifying someone while they were still breathing, how would you react? It sounds unbelievable, right? But the story I'm about to tell you is real. It happened in the town of Cabayan, in Benguet Province, located in the northern part of Luzon Island in the Philippines, a remote mountainous region that hides one of the strangest burial customs humanity has ever known. The story begins thousands of years ago, when the Ibaloy people, a native community living mainly in northern Philippines, developed a truly unique mummification ritual. Unlike ancient Egyptians or many other civilizations that only preserved bodies after death, the Ibaloy prepared for the journey to the afterlife while the person was still dying. According to the tradition, when a tribal leader, because only high-status individuals were allowed this ritual, reached the final stage of life, they were given an extremely concentrated saltwater solution. It was so strong that it quickly dehydrated the body and cleansed the internal organs in a way that sounds disturbing even by today's standards. Then, once the person passed away, the mummification process officially began. The body would be placed over fire and continuously smoked for weeks, sometimes even months. The fire did not just dry the body externally, it slowly penetrated inside, naturally preserving it. Thanks to this method, the Cabayan mummies could last for hundreds, even thousands of years without decomposing. What's even more striking is that the entire process could take up to 2 years. Once the body was completely dried, the mummy would be placed inside a pinewood coffin and then moved into deep caves within the mountains. Even today, the slopes around Cabayan still contain more than 200 such caves, with at least 15 of them holding ancient mummies. But the story doesn't end there. Behind this unusual ritual lies an extremely complex belief and social system. The Ibaloy people believed in spirits and deities, and they saw death not as an end, but as a journey into another world. And in order for the soul to continue its existence properly, the body had to be preserved. That is why mummification was not just a ritual, it was also a privilege. Only the wealthy and powerful, known as the Baknang, were granted this practice. The poorer members of society, known as the Abateg, were not given that opportunity. This clearly shows how social hierarchy existed even in death. In Ibaloy mythology, it is also said that their ancestors were survivors of a great flood caused by the anger of the gods. Perhaps this belief is why they placed such importance on preserving the body as a way to maintain a connection between the physical world and the spiritual realm. However, over time, when the Spanish colonized the Philippines and introduced Christianity, this smoke mummification ritual gradually disappeared. The burial caves were abandoned, only to be rediscovered by modern explorers in recent decades. Sadly, along with human curiosity, these priceless mummies are now under threat. Grave robbing and uncontrolled tourism are slowly damaging this ancient heritage. In fact, the region has even been listed among the world's most endangered cultural sites. So you see, every archaeological discovery is not just a story about the past, it is also a warning for the present. The Cabayan mummies are not just ancient remains. They are living evidence of belief, culture, and the incredible creativity of ancient humans. And what about you? If you had the chance to see these smoke-cured mummies in person, would you feel curious or afraid? Leave your thoughts below, because sometimes your perspective might open an entirely new way of understanding the mysteries of human history. And wouldn't that be fascinating? The 2,000-year-old library beneath Cologne, Germany, a treasure of 20,000 ancient Roman scrolls. Do you ever wonder whether, beneath the modern streets we walk on every day, entire ancient worlds might still be hidden, never truly discovered? And what if one day, just a few feet underground, you suddenly came across a 2,000-year-old library? It sounds like something straight out of a movie. Almost impossible to believe, right? But unfortunately, or perhaps amazingly, that assumption would be wrong. Because something exactly like that really happened in the city of Cologne, Germany in 2017, and it all began completely by accident. While renovation work was being carried out on the foundation of an old Protestant church to build a new community center, archaeologists suddenly discovered unusual traces beneath the ground. At first, no one thought it was anything significant, but the deeper they dug, the more they realized they were standing in front of a discovery that could change how we understand intellectual life in ancient Rome. What puzzled them most at the beginning were strange wall niches, square recesses measuring about 31 by 20 inches, evenly arranged along the walls. Can you guess what they were for? Not windows and not ordinary storage spaces. Then, as the clues began to come together, researchers made a stunning realization. These were storage spaces for ancient scrolls. That's right, you heard correctly. An ancient library, with an estimated capacity of up to 20,000 scrolls, had been lying silently underground for nearly 2 millennia. According to archaeologist Dirk Schmitz from the Romano-Germanic Museum, although this library is smaller than the famous Library of Celsus, built around 117 AD, its value is extremely significant. In fact, it may be the oldest library ever discovered in Germany, and possibly even in the entire northwestern region of the Roman Empire. This proves that Roman literacy and knowledge preservation were not limited to major cultural centers. They also spread into more remote regions. Another fascinating detail is its location. The Romans seemingly chose a highly strategic spot, right in the heart of ancient Cologne, a bustling urban center filled with trade and daily activity. This shows that they did not treat knowledge as a luxury, but rather as an essential part of everyday life. At its peak, the library may have stood 2 stories high, measuring about 66 feet long and 30 feet wide. It was even expanded over time. Inside one of the wall niches from the expansion area, archaeologists believe there may once have been a statue of Minerva, the Roman goddess of wisdom, equivalent to Athena in Greek mythology. This single detail alone reveals how deeply the ancient Romans valued knowledge. Just imagine, from a structure buried for nearly 2,000 years, we are able to reconstruct an entire intellectual world of ancient Rome. The scrolls may have disappeared over time, but their traces still remain, like a message sent from the past. And what makes me think the most is this: if a Roman library can still be hidden beneath a modern city like Cologne, how many other secrets might still be lying beneath our feet? Perhaps a temple, a treasure, or even an entire forgotten city. And what about you? Do you believe that history is still right beneath us, just waiting to be uncovered? Alien base on the moon. What would you think if I told you that aliens might actually be living on the moon? And it's not a joke? It sounds like science fiction, right? But hold on, today's story might make you think twice. A man named Tyler Glockner caused a stir online when he claimed to have discovered a strange structure in a photo officially released by NASA. Yes, you heard that right. NASA itself published the image and apparently didn't notice anything unusual in it. Tyler, who is also a member of the well-known amateur research group Secure Team 10, believes this was a mistake by NASA. He said, "They probably thought no one would have sharp enough eyes to notice those small details. But they were wrong." And here's the interesting part. When the video about this discovery was uploaded online, it quickly gained more than 269,000 views in a short time, along with thousands of comments from people around the world. Some people claim the structure looks like a pyramid standing prominently on the moon. Others said it resembles a nuclear power facility, even pointing out faint smoke-like trails that appear as if it is actively operating. Tyler even went further, stating, "This is not just a single object, it's an entire large-scale construction system." Are you getting chills yet? However, NASA maintains a more conservative stance. They argue that what people are seeing is simply a visual illusion, a phenomenon known as pareidolia, where the human brain recognizes familiar shapes in clouds, rocks, or in this case, the surface of the moon. But if it's really just imagination, then why do so many unusual features keep appearing repeatedly across different satellite images? More importantly, this is not the first time Secure Team 10 has made shocking claims about the moon. In multiple images from NASA's Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter, LRO, they have pointed out various suspicious features, from circular structures to floating disc-like objects and even shapes that resemble doors or tunnels. It sounds like science fiction, but all of it comes from real NASA imagery. And what's even more notable is that some independent researchers have also started raising questions. They are calling for NASA and other space agencies to expand lunar exploration programs, not only to study the moon's physical environment, but also to investigate whether something or someone might already be living there. What do you think? Is this simply a case of visual misinterpretation or evidence of an unknown extraterrestrial civilization? Leave your thoughts below, because this story might only be the tip of the iceberg. And who knows, next time we may not even need satellite images anymore, because the truth might already be much closer than we think. The underwater cemetery in Florida, the world's most unusual city of the dead. Dear friends, if one day you were asked where you would want to rest after leaving this world, what would you choose? A quiet cemetery on land or somewhere truly unique? And what if I told you there is a city beneath the ocean, where people are not only laid to rest, but also become part of the sea itself? If that still sounds hard to believe, then let's travel offshore from the city of Miami, Florida, where a strange yet deeply meaningful structure exists, called the Neptune Memorial Reef. Many people refer to it with a rather eerie but fascinating name, the City of the Dead Beneath the Ocean. At first, hearing the phrase underwater cemetery might send a chill down your spine, but in reality, this place carries a very different feeling, mysterious, peaceful, almost beautiful. It feels as if death here is not an end, but a return to nature. Not far from the coast of Miami, the Neptune Memorial Reef appears on the ocean floor like a submerged ancient city. And the fascinating part is, it was not formed naturally, but carefully designed and built by humans with a truly unique idea. The entire structure was inspired by Atlantis, the legendary lost city said to have disappeared beneath the Atlantic Ocean thousands of years ago. Deep underwater, among the blue sea, there are columns, statues, stone pathways, all forming the image of an ancient city seemingly asleep beneath the ocean. But the most remarkable part is this: it is now the resting place of thousands of people. Unlike traditional burials at the Neptune Memorial Reef after cremation, the ashes of the deceased are mixed with cement and shaped into coral-like structures. Professional divers then carry them down to the seabed and place them in pre-designed locations. Depending on the wishes of the family, these structures can take the form of statues, memorial plaques, or even personal symbols such as crosses or engraved bronze plates showing names, birth dates, and death dates. At this point, I believe many of you may start to see this place differently, because this is not just a cemetery, it is also a living part of the ocean. Covering an area of about 1.9 million square feet, the Neptune Memorial Reef is not only a resting place, but also the largest artificial reef in the world. And that brings an unexpected benefit. It has become a new home for countless marine species. Fish, coral, and many other sea creatures begin to live and grow around these memorial structures. In a way, the departed here are not only resting peacefully, they are also helping create new life. Because of its unique beauty, this place has become a popular destination for divers and visitors. When you dive here, you are not only exploring an incredible man-made structure, but also experiencing a very special environment where the boundary between life and death feels almost invisible. You see, rather than being forgotten beneath the ground, the people resting here continue to live on in another form, blending into nature and becoming part of a vast ocean ecosystem. Isn't that something truly extraordinary? The 2,100-year-old tomb in China with over 10,000 ancient artifacts and a king's buried treasure. There are stories in history that the deeper we dig, the more they remind us how small we are in the face of the wisdom and beliefs of ancient people. and the recently discovered 2,100-year-old tomb in Jiangsu Province, China, containing over 10,000 artifacts that have left archaeologists completely stunned, is exactly one of those discoveries. Just hearing that alone already feels chilling, doesn't it? But what makes this even more remarkable is that it was not a simple accidental discovery. Back in 2009 and 2011, archaeologists had already excavated 3 smaller tombs in the same area, along with tunnels containing ancient weapons and chariots. At that time, they already suspected the site was far from ordinary. However, no one expected that the true heart of the complex lay much deeper, larger, and unimaginably richer. The main tomb is estimated to be about 1,608 feet long, located within a massive earthen mound. Just the structure alone makes it clear that this was not the burial place of an ordinary person. It was built with highly standardized design, strongly reflecting the royal burial rituals of ancient China. The most distinctive feature is the 2 roads leading directly into the main burial area, each about 115 to 118 feet long. These pathways were not just architectural elements, they were ceremonial routes used exclusively to escort a king into the afterlife. And as archaeologists explored deeper, they were truly astonished. One of these passageways was filled with ancient chariots, intricately crafted from wood, lacquer, bronze, gold, and silver. These were not merely transportation tools of the past, they were symbols of absolute power, status, and wealth. Ancient people believed that even in the afterlife, a king would still need possessions worthy of his royal rank. But the treasure did not stop there. Inside the tomb, archaeologists also discovered a footmat made of gold, silver, and precious stones, an item so luxurious that it seems almost unbelievable even by today's standards. There was also a finely crafted golden rabbit, along with a collection of ancient musical instruments such as bronze bells and parts of a full orchestral ensemble. These objects were not simply decorations. They clearly reflect an ancient belief. Death was not the end, but the continuation of another life, where the king would still require music, service, and luxury. And then comes the most astonishing discovery. Directly beneath the king's coffin, archaeologists found over 100,000 coins from the first imperial dynasty in Chinese history. According to ancient beliefs, the dead still needed money in the afterlife. In other words, an entire financial treasury was buried alongside the king to support his journey beyond death. Just think about it. If a king was buried with such an enormous fortune, how immense must his power have been while he was alive? But the surprises did not end there. Another fascinating discovery that intrigued researchers was a bronze statue of an elephant. This provides evidence of cultural exchange between ancient China and Southeast Asia, where elephants were commonly found. It opens up new theories about ancient trade routes, diplomacy, and migration patterns dating back thousands of years. In addition to all of this, the entire tomb complex contains around 8,000 more artifacts made of gold, silver, jade, and lacquerware. Each item carries immense historical value, forming a vast cultural treasure from the ancient world. Archaeologists believe that this discovery not only helps us better understand the luxurious lives of ancient royalty, but also provides deep insight into burial rituals, belief systems, and cultural connections across ancient East Asia. And that is what makes this discovery truly extraordinary. The mysterious human foot, found in China. An elderly farmer named Lao Wang from Yunnan, China, goes up the mountain every day to dig for medicinal herbs. This time, while digging for sanqi, a traditional medicinal root, he suddenly discovered a strange object beside him. The old farmer felt that its shape looked not quite right. Curious, Lao Wang used his shovel to dig around the object in order to see it more clearly. However, the moment he saw what he had uncovered, he was so terrified that he immediately screamed. It turned out that what he had dug up looked extremely similar to a human foot. Lao Wang ran down the mountain and called villagers to come and see it. After calming down, he reported the discovery to the police. A group of police officers, along with the village chief and a few brave villagers, went to the location where Lao Wang had found the foot. What Lao Wang did not expect was that after examining the mysterious object, the officers suddenly burst into laughter. It turned out that what he had found was not a human foot at all. It was a type of plant tuber that they had never seen before. A botanist was then sent to the scene. The expert explained that the foot-shaped object Lao Wang discovered was actually a purple yam tuber. According to the specialist, this particular purple yam had a very unusual shape. It even resembled a human foot, complete with toe-like and nail-like structures. That was why Lao Wang mistook it for something so shocking at first glance. Moreover, the tuber was quite large in size. The expert said that Lao Wang was actually very lucky to have found such a rare specimen. He even suggested that if it were sold in a city, someone would definitely pay a high price for it. Purple yam is a vine plant that produces multiple tubers. Its scientific name is Dioscorea alata. It originates from tropical Asia and is mainly found in southern China, Indonesia, Africa, India, and Malaysia. Purple yam is significantly larger than sweet potatoes. It has a rough outer skin with many root-like fibers. Its flesh is usually purple, though some varieties are white or light purple. This plant thrives in hot and humid climates. Under natural conditions, it takes about 2 to 3 months to produce tubers. Purple yam has a mildly sweet and nutty flavor. When cooked, it becomes soft and smooth like potatoes, and it is commonly used in both sweet and savory dishes. It is a highly nutritious food, providing a rich source of energy and essential nutrients. In particular, purple yam contains many minerals, antioxidants, and vitamins that are beneficial to human health. Not only is it good for heart health, but it may also help with weight control and obesity. Experts say that eating purple yam can help people feel full for longer periods of time. At the same time, it contains no fat but is rich in dietary fiber. In addition, purple yam contains vitamin C and anthocyanins. These two compounds help protect the body's cells from damage caused by free radicals. Regular consumption of purple yam dishes may help reduce the risk of cancer and support overall health. This is truly an interesting discovery, don't you think? The 3,500-year-old temple and the mystery of child sacrifice in Peru. You might not believe it if I told you that a seemingly quiet coastal village, once home to ancient people who survived by hunting sharks, was hiding a shocking secret beneath its soil that could change history. But this is absolutely real. In the coastal region of Huanchaquito, Peru, archaeologists have recently uncovered a 3,500-year-old temple, revealing traces of an ancient civilization that is both mysterious and unsettling. Believed to be linked to the earliest fishing communities of the Gramalote settlement, this temple shows clear evidence that these people were not merely coastal survivors, they also had an extremely complex spiritual life. Previously, researchers believed that this community had not yet developed dedicated religious structures and instead had to travel hours to reach major regional temples. However, this groundbreaking discovery completely overturned that assumption. It turns out they had their own temple right within their living area. As excavation expanded, the research team discovered an open central corridor, designed with stepped platforms that may have once served as ceremonial stands, where rituals, sacrifices, or prayers were performed in front of the entire community. Behind this corridor were more private sections, connected by long hallways, suggesting a hierarchical structure within the temple space, possibly reflecting social and political divisions of that ancient society. Another remarkable detail was the presence of leftover reed fragments, indicating that the temple roof was likely made from this simple, natural material. This not only reflects adaptation to the local climate, but also reveals the construction techniques of an ancient indigenous civilization thousands of years ago. However, the most shocking discovery of all was the finding of 3 child skeletons inside the temple grounds. These remains suggest that child sacrifice rituals, both mysterious and deeply disturbing, may have been an integral part of the religious practices of the ancient Gramalot people. So why were children chosen as offerings? Were they considered sacred beings? Or were they sacrificed to ask the sea for protection and abundant harvests? Although there are still no definitive answers, this newly uncovered temple has ignited intense debate within the global archaeological community. Buried beneath layers of sand and time, some stories are still waiting to be told. And this 3,500-year-old temple is one of the most mysterious chapters in Peru's ancient history, one that humanity is only beginning to decode after thousands of years. 3,000-year-old mummy was taken to a hospital for a CT scan. The results left everyone stunned. My friends, have you ever imagined that one day, ancient mummies, the kind we usually only see in movies or museums, would be brought straight into a modern hospital for a checkup? It sounds strange, right? Maybe even a little unsettling. But this story is completely real, and its outcome will definitely make you rethink everything you thought you knew. You see, whenever people talk about mummies, they often picture bodies wrapped in linen, lying motionless in coffins, hands crossed over their chest, carrying secrets that have never been fully uncovered. But here's the thing. Beneath those wrappings, it's not always a human body. And that's exactly what led to one of the most shocking discoveries. This story begins at the National Maritime Museum of Israel. There, researchers decided to take two ancient coffins, believed to contain the mummified remains of children from ancient Egypt, dating back about 3,000 years, to a city hospital for CT scans. Just hearing that is enough to spark curiosity, isn't it? Because when modern science meets ancient history, any secret can be revealed. At first, everything suggested that the coffins contained the remains of children. Their small size, their shape, and even earlier records indicated that one of the mummies still had a preserved heart inside. But when the CT images appeared, everything changed. There was no child inside. Instead, what they found was grain. Yes, you heard that right. The child mummy that people had believed in for so long was actually made of mud and grains. A special type of mummy known as a grain mummy. These were carefully crafted to resemble real mummies, even given names as if they were once living beings. So the question is, why would the ancient Egyptians create something like this? According to experts, these unusual mummies may represent Osiris, the god of the afterlife in Egyptian mythology. They weren't just objects, they carried deep spiritual meaning, symbolizing life, death, and rebirth. Hearing this, you can probably start to sense just how complex ancient Egyptian beliefs really were. But the story doesn't end there. The second coffin brought another surprise. When doctors examined it, they discovered that it didn't contain a human either. It held the mummified remains of a bird, most likely a falcon. And this opened up an entirely new way of understanding this ancient civilization. In ancient Egyptian society, the falcon was no ordinary animal. It was closely associated with Horus, the god of the sky, a symbol of power, life, and rebirth. The Egyptians believed Horus observed the world through two special eyes, the right eye representing the sun and the left eye representing the moon. Because of this, the falcon was seen as a sacred protector. Now think about it. If a mummified bird was placed inside a coffin alongside symbols of death and the afterlife, could it really be just an animal? Or was it meant to guard and guide the soul of the deceased? In fact, the ancient Egyptians didn't just mummify humans. They also mummified many animals: dogs, cats, crocodiles, and especially birds. These mummies were often used in religious rituals, as people believed the gods could take the form of animals, or at least shared a deep connection with them. To them, death wasn't the end. On the contrary, it was simply a doorway to another life, a place where the soul still needed a home to exist, and that home was the preserved body. Because of this powerful belief, mummification became an essential part of daily life, even influencing the economy of ancient Egypt. Animals were bred, rituals were performed, and sacred objects were created to serve the journey into the afterlife. But returning to those two mysterious coffins, even to this day, no one can say for certain why they ended up in the museum. Were they offerings, religious symbols, or perhaps messages left behind by the pharaohs for future generations? The answer may still be out there, waiting to be discovered. So what do you think? What do these mummies truly represent? Leave your thoughts below, because who knows, you might be the one to offer a perspective no one has ever considered before. After all, none of us can predict what might be uncovered next, right? CT technology reveals the true face of a famous ancient Egyptian pharaoh's mummy, sealed for thousands of years. As you know, for centuries, mummies have remained one of the greatest mysteries of ancient Egyptian civilization. People are both fascinated and cautious, because each layer of linen wrapped around a body doesn't just conceal a person, it preserves an untold story. And when it comes to the mummies of pharaohs, the most powerful rulers of their time, those secrets become even more difficult to uncover. One remarkable case is the mummy of Amenhotep I, who ruled Egypt about 3,500 years ago. What's truly astonishing is that although his mummy was discovered as far back as 1881, for more than a century afterward, archaeologists did not dare unwrap the outer layers. It wasn't because they lacked curiosity, but because they understood that even the smallest mistake could permanently damage this priceless relic. But then, modern science opened an entirely new path. Instead of physically unwrapping the mummy, Egyptian scientists turned to 3D CT scanning, a non-invasive method that allows researchers to see through the layers without causing any harm. And from that moment on, an extraordinary journey of discovery began. When the first images appeared, researchers were nearly holding their breath. For the first time in thousands of years, the body of this pharaoh was revealed to the modern world, but in a completely different way. No cutting, no physical contact, yet every detail gradually emerged with astonishing clarity. According to the analysis, Pharaoh Amenhotep I stood about 5 feet 6 inches tall and died at the age of 35. Not a particularly old age, especially for a king. This has led many to wonder, what exactly happened to him? Interestingly, after careful examination, scientists found no signs of fatal injuries. In other words, the cause of his death remains a mystery. Beyond that, CT technology also revealed physical features that no one could have imagined before. He was described as having a narrow chin, a small and slender nose, curly hair, and relatively healthy teeth. In fact, his upper teeth protruded slightly, a very human detail that makes this ancient pharaoh feel unexpectedly relatable. Notably, researchers also discovered that he had been circumcised, a common practice in ancient Egyptian society, carrying deep religious and cultural significance. But that's not all. Hidden within the wrappings were as many as 30 carefully placed amulets, along with a unique golden belt positioned around his waist. These items were not only valuable in material terms, but also held profound spiritual meaning, believed to protect the pharaoh's soul on its journey to the afterlife. Hearing this, can you feel yourself slowly stepping into the world of ancient Egypt? However, not everything discovered was perfectly preserved. Scientists observed several damages on the mummy's body, but notably, these did not occur before his death. Instead, they were most likely caused by ancient tomb robbers. And then comes a surprising detail. More than 400 years later, priests carried out restoration work on the mummy, repairing the damage and preserving it with great care. This shows that, no matter how much time had passed, the ancient Egyptians always held deep respect for their pharaohs. The story of Amenhotep I is not just a scientific discovery. It is a bridge between the past and the present. Thanks to modern technology, we are no longer just looking at a mummy. We are witnessing a human being, a king who once lived, ruled, and was revered. Isn't that truly incredible? 1,900-year-old mummy hid a secret inside that left everyone speechless. There's an interesting truth that many people overlook. Sometimes, the greatest secrets of history aren't in what we can see, but in what has been most carefully hidden. And to prove that point, let me tell you a story like no other. A story that only modern technology has allowed us to see through, reaching back nearly 2,000 years into the past. To help you picture it, imagine this. Right in front of you is an ancient Egyptian mummy, still completely wrapped in its original linen, untouched since the day it was buried. In that situation, what would you do? Would you unwrap it to find answers, or leave it intact to preserve it? For centuries, this very question puzzled scientists. And it wasn't until recently that a team of researchers from Northwestern University found an answer in a way no one expected. They didn't open the mummy. Instead, they used powerful X-rays combined with CT scanning technology, a method that allows them to see through every layer without causing any damage. And from that moment on, secrets that had long been silent began to reveal themselves. Using this advanced technology, the team examined an ancient Egyptian mummy that is about 1,900 years old. When the images appeared, the first thing that surprised experts was the identity of the body inside. It wasn't a noble nor a powerful figure. It was a little girl about 5 years old. Just hearing that makes everything feel heavier, doesn't it? In the midst of a great civilization, among pyramids and mighty pharaohs, there existed the story of a small child, carefully buried and preserved for thousands of years. Thanks to high-resolution X-ray imaging, scientists were able to clearly observe the condition inside her body. They found that her skeleton was largely intact, with no signs of trauma or severe injury. This led them to a reasonable conclusion. She likely died from illness rather than from an accident or violence, But what makes this story even more remarkable lies in a deeply spiritual detail. The girl was buried with a scarab amulet. In ancient Egyptian culture, the scarab beetle was not just an ordinary insect. It symbolized rebirth and protection. The Egyptians believed such an amulet would guide and safeguard the soul of the deceased on its journey to the afterlife. And the fact that a child was buried with it shows just how much faith and love her family placed in her. As researchers continued their analysis, even more details emerged. For example, the girl had no permanent teeth yet, a clear sign of her young age. Her height, measuring only about 36.9 inches from head to toe, further emphasized the fragility of a life that ended far too soon. Not only that, but the outer linen wrapping also impressed scientists. Though only about 0.2 inches thick, it was enough to preserve the body for nearly 2 millennia. This demonstrates that ancient Egyptian mummification techniques were not only sophisticated, but remarkably durable over time. Then came another surprising discovery. Experts found a total of 36 needle-like objects placed around the body. Of these, 11 were located around the head and neck, 20 near the feet, and 5 along the torso. These objects may have been related to religious rituals or a special preservation method. However, their true meaning remains not fully understood to this day. You see, the more we uncover, the more questions arise instead of answers. What's most remarkable is that all of these discoveries were made without unwrapping the mummy. This marks the first time an intact mummy has been examined using modern X-ray and CT technology. A major breakthrough that not only helps preserve ancient artifacts, but also opens a new path for archaeology. The mummy of this young girl was excavated at Hawara around 1910 to 1911. This site dates back to the 1st century AD, a time when Egypt was under Roman rule. Since then, the mummy has become part of the collection at the Northwestern University Museum of Art. A long journey from the depths of the ancient earth to a modern laboratory. And now, as its secrets slowly come to light, we are no longer just looking at a mummy, we are witnessing the story of a child who once lived in history. Isn't that truly fascinating? Strange female mummies in Vietnam, resting for hundreds of years, yet astonishingly well preserved. My friends, when people hear the word mummy, they often think of distant Egypt, with its massive pyramids and powerful pharaohs. But did you know that in Vietnam, a small land with a long and heroic history, there are also mummies that have amazed scientists? Not only because of their incredible state of preservation, but also because of the treasures buried alongside them. It may sound hard to believe, right? But the deeper you go into these stories, the more you'll realize that history can feel much closer than we think. Our first story takes us to Ho Chi Minh City, the second largest city in Vietnam. In 1994, an ancient tomb was discovered in the Som Khai area of District 5. What immediately surprised people was its depth. It lay nearly 26 feet underground. It took 15 young men working continuously for 40 days just to reach the bottom. Just imagine that. If digging alone was that difficult, then this was clearly no ordinary construction. The tomb chamber was built from a solid compound as strong as fortress walls. Inside was a large coffin made from 2 layers of precious wood. When it was opened, archaeologists found 2 layers of woven mats and a sheet of dough paper more than 2 inches thick, a preservation method that still impresses experts today. Then came the most astonishing moment. Submerged in a reddish liquid resembling perfumed oil, the body inside was wrapped in 9 layers of clothing made from fine fabrics, silk, and brocade. It was a woman about 60 years old. Remarkably, her skin remained smooth and soft, her joints still flexible, with almost no signs of decomposition. A sight so extraordinary that it's hard to believe without seeing it firsthand. And that wasn't all. The tomb contained numerous gold and silver items, including a pair of golden shoes, clear evidence of the woman's high status. As expected, inscriptions on the artifacts helped identify her as Nguyen Thi Hue, a member of the royal family during the reign of Jia Long. Today, her mummy is preserved and displayed at the Ho Chi Minh City Museum of History. Turning back the clock to 1968, in Van Cat village in Nam Dinh province, another ancient tomb was excavated. This one followed a coffin-inside sarcophagus design with an outer casing nearly 12 inches thick, made from multiple layers of extremely durable compound. The inner coffin was crafted from precious woods such as engok, am, and ironwood. materials known for their strength. When opened, researchers were once again stunned. Inside was the body of another woman, also around 60 years old. Her skin was pale and smooth, her hair lightly graying but still soft. Most strikingly, her eyes still showed clear whites and pupils, and her blackened teeth remained intact. Just hearing that is enough to send chills down your spine, isn't it? And it didn't stop there. Her burial garments were overwhelming in number. 35 long robes made of silken brocade, 18 skirts, along with personal items such as paper fans, betel pouches, silk scarves, and even tobacco. On her chest lay a rosary of 101 dark wooden beads, along with 2 scriptures stored in a brocade pouch. After analysis, experts identified her as Pham Thai Dang, the wife of a high-ranking official in ancient Vietnam. But there's yet another story, perhaps even more unusual. In 1957, in Thanh Hoa province, a tomb containing a mummy was discovered, though it had already been disturbed by locals. The body had been removed from its coffin, left in an open field for 3 days, then reburied in waterlogged conditions for nearly a month. Anyone would assume the mummy had been severely damaged. But when archaeologists re-excavated it, they could hardly believe their eyes. The mummy remained intact, and even more surprisingly, it emitted a fragrant scent of preservation oils. Even after being washed 5 times with clean water, the scent did not disappear. In fact, the surrounding soil retained the fragrance for quite some time. Based on inscriptions and remaining evidence, experts concluded that this was a consort from the Trine family, buried around the 17th century. Although only a few artifacts remained, they were enough to reflect her wealth and status. Through these 3 stories, we can see that ancient Vietnamese people possessed highly sophisticated preservation techniques, ones that rivaled any civilization in the world. So what do you think made these mummies last for hundreds of years in such remarkable condition? Was it technique, environment, or something science still cannot fully explain? Leave your thoughts, because who knows, you might be the one to uncover the answer to one of the most fascinating mysteries in Vietnamese history. 1,000-year-old mummy wearing shoes that look like Adidas. Hey, imagine this. One day you come across an ancient mummy, but on its feet is a pair of shoes that look just like something from the modern world. What would you think? You'd probably assume it only exists in science fiction, right? Well, if that's what you think, I'm afraid you'd be mistaken, because this discovery is completely real. In fact, it sparked intense debate among both scientists and the online community for quite some time. The story begins in 2016, when archaeologists conducted an excavation in the Altai Mountains of Mongolia, a region known for its harsh climate and year-round freezing conditions. Ironically, these extreme conditions act like a natural freezer, preserving ancient remains almost perfectly for centuries. During the excavation, researchers uncovered a remarkable tomb. Inside was a mummy dating back about 1,000 years. Initial analysis showed that the remains belonged to a woman who died between the ages of 30 and 40. But what caught the experts' attention wasn't just her age or the time period, it was the condition of her body. Specifically, the woman appeared to have suffered a severe head injury before her death. This detail led many to wonder, did she experience some kind of attack or tragic event in her final days? Alongside the body were numerous burial items, almost like a snapshot of her life. There was a horse, a saddle, a bag, 4 sets of clothing, a knife for protection, a comb, and even a mirror. These objects suggest she may have belonged to a person of status, while also offering a vivid glimpse into everyday life at that time. But then, one small detail stopped everyone in their tracks. It was the shoes. The shoes on the mummy's feet featured red and black stripes, a design that immediately reminded many people of modern Adidas footwear. When images of the discovery were released, the internet practically exploded. Some people were curious, others skeptical, and quite a few began proposing bold theories. Some even suggested this could be evidence of time travel. It sounds a bit far-fetched, doesn't it? But if you put yourself in their position, seeing what looks like modern-style shoes on a 1,000-year-old mummy, it's not hard to understand why such ideas emerged. Some imagined that the woman might have come from the future, bringing her familiar shoes with her, only to somehow become trapped in the past. And if that were true, it would be one of the most shocking pieces of evidence for time travel ever discovered. However, scientists offer a far less dramatic explanation. They point out that while the shoes may resemble modern Adidas designs, it's likely just a coincidence in style. Striped patterns have appeared throughout history in many different cultures, and there is no evidence suggesting these shoes came from modern times. In other words, the time travel theory remains purely speculative. Even so, this discovery is incredibly significant. It not only highlights the remarkable preservation made possible by harsh natural conditions, but also helps us better understand the clothing, culture, and daily life of people who lived 1,000 years ago. So what do you think? Are those shoes simply a coincidence? Or is there still something science hasn't fully explained yet? Deformed mummy shocks the world with 3 fingers, like something from another world. Throughout history, humans have often believed we understand our own species quite well, but every so often, a discovery comes along that makes us pause and ask, do we really know everything? This next story takes you to a place filled with mystery, Nazca, Peru, famous for its massive geoglyphs that still haven't been fully explained. But in 2017, what stirred global attention wasn't those lines. It was a strange mummy discovered there, a mummy with only 3 fingers. Experts named this mummy Maria. From the very first glance, Maria left people stunned. Not only did the hands have 3 unusually long fingers, but the skull was also elongated in an unusual way, and it even appeared to lack a typical human nasal opening. Just imagine standing in front of a body like that. What would you think? A human? A mutation? Or something entirely different? Scientists, of course, set out to find answers. They conducted a series of tests, from DNA analysis to carbon dating. The results showed that Maria was female and lived about 1,800 years ago. But what made things more complicated was her genetic structure. According to the research, about 98.5% of Maria's DNA belongs to primates, in other words, nearly human. But the remaining 1.5% doesn't match any known data in modern science. It may seem like a small fraction, but it opens the door to countless possibilities. One of the leading hypotheses suggests that Maria could belong to an unknown ancient human lineage, a branch of evolution that once existed but disappeared without leaving clear traces. Another, more controversial theory proposes something even more extraordinary, that Maria might be the result of a hybrid between humans and extraterrestrial life. It sounds like science fiction, but when faced with such an unusual form, it's not surprising that some people think this way. Of course, not everyone agrees. Many experts remain skeptical, arguing that this could simply be an elaborate hoax. According to them, the mummy may have been constructed using plaster or synthetic materials, designed to deceive the public and attract attention. This theory is partly based on the structure of the rib cage and skeleton, which show differences from typical human anatomy. So, the story circles back to the same question: who or what is Maria? A mutated human? A forgotten species? A fabricated creation? Or genuine evidence of something beyond our current understanding? As of now, there is still no definitive answer. Each theory has its own arguments, but also its own unanswered questions. And perhaps that's what makes this story so fascinating, because sometimes it's the mysteries without answers that keep humanity searching. What do you think? Nearly intact, 16th century mummy of a man, buried alongside a mouse. In the world of archaeology, there are discoveries that simply make people say, "That's interesting." And then there are those that leave even scientists silent in thought. The story of a mummy that has existed for more than 400 years, still almost perfectly preserved and carrying secrets that remain unsolved to this day, is one of them. It comes from the small town of Guano in Ecuador. Back in 1949, researchers there discovered a mummy dating to the 16th century. From the very beginning, the find drew major attention because of the body's exceptional state of preservation, far beyond what anyone expected. But the story became truly fascinating years later when a French forensic pathologist, Philippe Charlier, began a deeper investigation. Now, Charlier is no stranger in the scientific world. He has studied many historical figures, even the remains associated with Adolf Hitler. So when he turned his attention to this mummy, many believed that secrets buried for centuries were finally about to be revealed, and they were. The first thing that amazed experts was the mummy's near-perfect condition. This level of preservation wasn't by chance. The region's naturally dry and cool environment acted like an ideal preservation chamber, preventing the man's body from decomposing over time. Thanks to these conditions, scientists were able to closely examine details about his health. something that isn't possible with most mummies. Then came an important discovery. According to Charlier's analysis, the man showed signs of a chronic illness, rheumatoid arthritis. This autoimmune disease causes joint swelling, pain, and gradual loss of mobility. Living with such a condition centuries ago, when medicine was still limited, must have been extremely difficult. But what stood out even more was his age. He is believed to have lived to around 85 to 90 years old, an exceptionally high age for that time period. This raised new questions among researchers. Did he belong to a higher social class with better living conditions? Or did he follow a unique lifestyle that contributed to his longevity? Just when things seemed intriguing enough, another detail changed everything. Right beside the mummy, experts found a mummified mouse. Yes, a mouse, not gold, not jewelry, but a small animal buried alongside the man. This discovery immediately sparked a wave of questions. Was it a coincidence? Part of a ritual? Or did the mouse carry some symbolic meaning that we still don't understand? To this day, no one has a definitive answer. The identity of the man remains unknown. The connection between him and the mouse is still unclear, and it's precisely these unanswered questions that make the story even more compelling. You see, history isn't just what has been recorded, it's also what has been left behind. The mysteries without answers, waiting quietly for the day they are finally uncovered. So what do you think? Why was this man buried with a mouse? Was it an ancient ritual, a spiritual belief, or simply a strange coincidence? Embroidered brocade robe with vultures found in an ancient tomb in China, a Persian imprint between China and an unsolved mystery. The story begins in a dry desert region at the foot of the Tian Shan Mountains in southern Xinjiang. This area has a unique climate, dry, cold, and almost completely lacking in humidity, an environment many archaeologists jokingly call a natural storage vault for history. Because of this, when excavations began, experts already suspected they might find a mummy. And indeed, after just a few days of digging, they did. But what truly stunned researchers wasn't the body, it was the clothing the individual was wearing. It was a brocade robe dating back to the Northern Song dynasty, a period renowned for its exquisite textile craftsmanship. What made this garment especially remarkable was its design. Woven into the fabric was the image of a pair of vultures, positioned back to back, surrounded by highly detailed plant motifs. At first glance, it might seem ordinary, but look closer, and you'll notice something unusual. The design doesn't fully match traditional Chinese artistic styles. The robe features a cross collar and narrow sleeves made from triple-layered cotton fabric with patterns of arrows and spheres, details commonly seen during the Song dynasty. However, the arrangement of the motifs, and especially the imagery of vultures, shows a strong influence from ancient Persian art. Doesn't that seem a bit strange? A garment discovered in China, yet reflecting styles from Central Asia and even Western Asia. This suggests that cultural exchange between regions was far more dynamic thousands of years ago than we often imagine. Inside the robe, the lining is made of plain silk in a camel yellow color, while the cuffs feature floral and bird patterns, a style commonly associated with the Tang dynasty. All these elements come together to create an artifact that is not only visually stunning, but also rich in historical significance. But what puzzled researchers the most were two mysterious symbols found on the robe. No one has been able to definitively identify them. Some believe they could be local script, possibly directly related to the identity of the person buried in the tomb. If that's true, then deciphering these symbols could reveal who they were, where they came from, and why they were buried there. However, there's another, more daring theory. Some scholars suggest that these symbols might not be Chinese or Central Asian at all, but rather ancient Arabic script, possibly meaning "in the name of God." If this is true, it opens up a fascinating possibility. The individual buried in the tomb may have been a follower of Islam, or at least had connections to the Islamic world of that time. Now things start to feel much more complex, don't they? A single garment, yet layered with so many meanings. Beyond its design and materials, the motifs themselves carry deep symbolic significance. In ancient Persian culture, vultures were seen as protectors of the soul, while the tree of life symbolized immortality. Beaded details may represent the sun, a source of life and light. All of these elements combine into a message that people in the past may have intentionally left behind, yet one we still don't fully understand today. And that is what makes this discovery so special. It's not just an artifact, it's a doorway into the cultural exchange between East and West, a reminder that the ancient world may have been far more connected than we ever imagined. Ancient Greek tomb, containing human remains and chariots, reveals a shocking mystery. In the region of Thrace, located in northeastern Greece, a land once associated with legendary horse-riding warriors, archaeologists discovered a burial complex known as Doxapara. Even at first mention, it already sounds like something extraordinary, and indeed it is. As excavations began, researchers quickly realized this was no ordinary tomb, because inside, they found not only human remains, but also chariots and horse skeletons. According to experts, the burial site dates back to the early 2nd century AD. Notably, it did not contain just one individual, but the remains of 4 members of the same family, 3 men and 1 woman. All are believed to have belonged to a wealthy landowning class, holding high status in their society. But what truly sets this tomb apart lies in its burial rituals. These 4 individuals were not simply laid to rest. They were placed in 4 separate large pits, surrounded by a wide array of grave goods, items made of clay, glass, and bronze, along with lamps, weapons, jewelry, and even wooden boxes. Everything seemed carefully arranged, as if preparing them for a long journey, a journey into the afterlife. Then came a detail that left everyone astonished. 5 chariots, the very vehicles that had carried the bodies to their burial site, were also placed and buried alongside them. And not just that, each chariot was accompanied by a horse. In total, 5 horses were sacrificed and buried as well. Just imagine that for a moment, a burial ritual in which both chariots and horses, valuable and powerful assets, were offered in this way. How high must this family's status have been? In ancient Thracian society, horses were more than just a means of transportation. They symbolized strength, power, and prestige. The warriors of this region were famous for their horseback combat, forming formidable cavalry forces. So burying horses with the dead wasn't only practical, it carried deep spiritual meaning. And what about the chariots? At that time, chariots were not merely vehicles. They represented technology and social rank. Only the wealthy and powerful could own them. Bringing chariots into the grave may have been a way to ensure that the deceased retained their status, even in the afterlife. To ancient people, death was not the end. Instead, it was seen as a continuation, a new existence where one would still need familiar things, tools, belongings, even symbols of power. That's why the Doxapara tomb is more than just a burial site. It is a vivid portrait of the beliefs, culture, and way of life of an ancient civilization. And it makes us wonder, is what we're seeing only the tip of the iceberg? How many more secrets are still hidden beneath the earth, waiting to be uncovered? Ancient rock art reveals an Egyptian invasion from 3,000 years ago. You know, our history is fascinating and mysterious. Sometimes it isn't written in words, it's carved into stone, painted on walls, quietly existing for thousands of years, waiting for the day modern humans finally uncover it. And when that day comes, what emerges isn't just imagery, it's an entire story behind it. In this next journey, I'll take you to 2 discoveries that may seem unrelated at first, yet together they open up a much broader picture of the ancient world, where power, belief, and mystery intertwine in ways we can hardly imagine. The first story begins at Wadi Kamila, located in the Sinai Peninsula, an area once within the sphere of influence of ancient Egypt. Here, archaeologists discovered a rock carving dating back roughly 3,000 years. At first glance, the carving immediately captures attention. At its center is the figure of a man striding forward, both arms raised as if displaying his strength. This posture doesn't just suggest physical power, it conveys authority and dominance. But just below, the scene shifts dramatically. Another man is shown kneeling, his hands bound behind his back with an arrow piercing his chest. The image needs no explanation. It is a symbol of defeat, of someone who has been conquered. Behind the kneeling figure appears a boat, seemingly a small detail, yet one with major significance. In ancient Egyptian culture, boats were not only means of transportation, but also symbols of power and control. When all these elements are put together, the rock carving appears to tell the story of a successful expedition, one in which the Egyptians conquered and asserted control over the Sinai region. In fact, researchers note that during the pre-dynastic, early dynastic and Old Kingdom periods, Egyptian rulers frequently sent expeditions to this area to exploit its resources. This carving may well serve as a kind of visual record of those campaigns. Doesn't it feel like you're watching a moment from ancient history, frozen in stone? But the story doesn't end there. We now continue our journey to the northwestern coast of Peru, where another discovery has left archaeologists equally astonished. At a site known as Huaca Yolanda, researchers uncovered a massive mural dating back more than 3,000 years. What's truly remarkable is that despite thousands of years passing, the mural still retains its vibrant colors: blue, yellow, red, and black, as if it had been painted just yesterday. The wall stretches about 20 feet wide and nearly 10 feet high, standing silently for millennia, yet upon it unfolds an entire world: fish, fishing nets, stars, mythical creatures, and human figures, all vividly depicted. On the southern side, a striking image stands out: a large bird, possibly an eagle or falcon, spreading its wings as if covering everything below. Meanwhile, the northern section features unusual cosmic symbols and figures resembling shamans. Together, these elements create a scene that feels both mystical and deeply symbolic. Dr. Mauricio described the moment of discovery with a single word: astonishing. She noted that nothing like this had ever been documented in the region before, making the mural truly one of a kind. According to researchers, this structure belongs to the early period, around 2000 to 1000 BC, a crucial era when the first complex societies began to form in Peru. And this raises an intriguing question. Why did ancient people create such cosmic imagery? Were they expressing their understanding of the universe or trying to send a message to the future? We may not have the answers yet, but as you can see, from the rock carvings in Sinai to the murals in Peru, there's one common thread. Thousands of years ago, humans were already trying to record what they believed, what they experienced, and what they wanted future generations to understand. Isn't that fascinating? 7 ancient swords and 6,000 coins reveal a hidden chapter of German history. During a routine survey in the small town of Mirau, located in northern Germany, a place few would suspect of holding an invaluable historical treasure, a team of volunteer conservators from the State Office for Culture and Monument Protection unexpectedly discovered unusual signs beneath the ground. At first, they were only hoping to find small traces of the past, but as layer after layer of soil was removed, they realized they were standing in front of something far more significant. Fragments of ancient metal began to appear. At a glance, they seemed scattered and shapeless, but after careful collection and analysis, experts determined that these fragments were the remains of 7 ancient swords, dating back roughly 3,000 years, placing them in the Bronze Age. These swords had rested silently underground since a time when humans had not yet developed modern iron and steel. They were once forged by ancient craftsmen, possibly carried by warriors, used in battle, or even involved in sacred rituals. And that possibility is exactly what caught researchers' attention. They believed the swords were not simply abandoned. Instead, they may have been deliberately placed as part of a ritual offering, a practice common in many Bronze Age cultures where weapons were given to the gods as a way to seek protection or show reverence. But what made this discovery even more shocking was what they found nearby. As the excavation expanded, the team uncovered a large number of ancient silver coins, not dozens, not hundreds, but around 6,000 coins. Just hearing that, you can probably picture a real treasure, right? Most of these coins were found inside a ceramic vessel, as if someone had carefully hidden them long ago. However, many others were scattered across the ground, leaving archaeologists with a puzzling question. What exactly happened here? Was this a hidden treasure that was never recovered? Or the trace of a dramatic event, a battle, a sudden escape, or a disaster that prevented its owner from ever returning? According to experts, most of the coins were minted in what is now Western Germany and date back to around the 11th century AD. This detail is particularly fascinating because it shows that the site was used across multiple historical periods, from the Bronze Age, with its ancient swords, to the medieval era, with a massive cache of silver coins. And that's what makes this discovery truly unique. It's not just a single find, it's a layering of history. Different time periods coexisting in one place, forming a vivid timeline of human activity. Researchers believe that this collection of 6,000 silver coins may be the largest Slavic coin hoard ever discovered to date. This gives it not only material value, but also immense importance for understanding the region's economy, culture, and trade networks in the past. You see, from what seemed like a simple excavation, we're able to trace our way back thousands of years, touching the lives of ancient people through their weapons, their rituals, their currency, and their daily existence. And isn't that truly remarkable? As you can see, what makes these discoveries truly special may not be how strange they are, but the way they remind us that the past still holds countless untold stories. Every artifact, every mummy, every unsolved mystery is like a missing piece of history waiting to be completed. So, which discovery impressed you the most? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to give ancient history a like and subscribe to the channel. For now, goodbye, and see you in the next video.